A sketch of the history and design of the Great Pyramid by William Matthew Flinders Petrie. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. So I was planning on taking last week off, and we didn't. And we're not.
So we're taking this week off.
We're not taking this week off either. So I don't know what happened to my podcasting vacation. But yeah, I thought last week was great. Really glad Marty could come back, and I think we had a good conversation. And we got to tackle a bunch of emails, which is another thing we have to do this week. Like, we're getting behind on the emails. So as it stands right now, we don't actually know what this show is going to be about. Is it going to be listener communications, or are we going to be able to tackle some other stuff after we handle them emails? Well, we're going to find out as we go. Yep. Which is that's par for the course.
Yeah.
We come down here and we sit into the studio and we're like, what are we doing? And I'm like, well, I have a bunch of emails.
Well, we've been planning for a month or two to do this Petrie stuff that I was like all ready to do a month or two ago. And then like today at 2:05, I was like, oh, I need to look that up. So it's anyway.
Yeah.
If we get to it, it'll still be good.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, let's do Space Weather News from spaceweather.com. Quadrantid meteor shower. Earth is approaching a stream of debris from comet fragment 2003EH1, which is the source of the annual quadrantid meteor shower.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, forecasters expect the shower to peak at 2040 UT, which is 3:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on January 3rd. Producing more than 60 meteors an hour from a radiant near the North Star. The timing of the peak favors European and Asian observers, although late-arriving quadrantids could sprinkle North America as well. Wherever you live, be alert for meteors on Monday night. Also, there is a tiny crescent in the sunset sky, and it's Venus. On January 8th, Venus will pass almost directly between Earth and the Sun, an event astronomers call an inferior conjunction. Around this time, Venus looks like a crescent because it's turning its night side towards us. During some inferior conjunctions, Venus transits the face of the sun. Not this year, though. At closest approach on Saturday, Venus and the sun will be separated by 5 degrees. This means careful daytime shots of Venus will be possible. When Venus is very close to the sun, the crescent can close upon itself, making a complete circle, but that probably won't happen this year. The 5-degree sun-Venus separation is too wide. That's cool. Yeah. Daytime shots of Venus. That should be cool.
I don't imagine you can see the crescent with the naked eye. You probably have to.
Yeah, you got to use.
Yeah. But then the sun's right there, so it could really be dangerous.
Yeah, if you go to the website and read, there's a lot more in here that I skipped, which is because it's about quoting photographers trying to do this. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, which doesn't make it a good news story. But yeah, go read it. They talk about how they block their tools from the sun and stuff like that. Current conditions, solar wind speed, 513.6 kilometers per second. The density is 8.1 protons per cubic centimeter. Current sunspot number is 25. The neutron count is only 7.6% above the space age average, so that seems to be going down. And let's see, KP index is 2, quiet, but the 24-hour max was 4, which is unsettled. So there you go, Space Weather News.
All right. 25 spots.
Let's see, what's the crypto update? Bitcoin, $45,803.38, gone way down. Buy in. And Ethereum is $3,686.28. Is that right? I thought
also down.
Yeah, but I looked at it just before we started the show, and it was 2,000.
No way.
Okay, it's 3,686. Yeah. But still, time to buy.
That's right.
All right, news stories.
James Webb Telescope. That is all.
All right, let's tackle emails. Let me scroll back here. First one from Anonymous, posted on the website. Have listened to you guys for hours on end during my long commutes. Randall Carlson in 1 minute has to be your crowning achievement.
Yeah.
I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears of laughter. Thank you for that, Snakes Rock.
Thank you, buddy.
Okay, this one is from Matthew. Inside the Red Pyramid, the enigma of the weathered grotto. So when I was reading this, I'm thinking of the Red Pyramid because we crawled through it. And maybe you'll know what he's talking about. He says, hello, Snakes. Since you're in full pyramid mode, I wanted to ask about something that has captivated me about the Red Pyramid and wondered if you saw anything similar in the Bent Pyramid. It was closed last time I was there. In the central part of the Red Pyramid, there is a grotto of sorts of very weathered stones in a spiraling, chaotic arrangement.
Don't know what he's talking about.
I don't either. The contrast to the smooth, new pyramid stones built on top of and around this feature is striking. It is hard to find much about this feature anywhere, but I know John Anthony West was struck by it as indicative of the Red Pyramid having been built on top of an older structure. The inside of the pyramid was once outside. That would have to be something really, really old. I have seen traces of this discussion in the internet with John Anthony West wanting to have the ages of these stones tested, but I don't see anything indicating that this ever took place. I'm wondering if, one, there is a similar feature inside the Bent Pyramid, and two, if you ever came across anything in your studies that dealt with this weathered grotto at the heart of the Red Pyramid. In my mind, this is one of the most captivating features I have seen discussed about Egypt, as it would seem to provide the tantalizing possibility of demonstrating the existence of ancient structures having been present before the pyramids. Thank you. So yeah, Matthew, my problem with this is I don't know what you mean by weathered grotto. We crawled all through the Red Pyramid, and I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, I have no idea either.
I mean, what I remember the most about the Red Pyramid are the two corbelled rooms, right? I mean, what else was in there? Or is there some area we didn't get to in there?
Is there this one with the floor missing, like where they had dug into the floor of it?
I don't know.
No, because they built a wooden floor over that. I guess there was a pit under there.
Oh, is that what it was?
Remember there was a wooden floor in one of the rooms, and Yusuf played the flute in there?
Yes. Is that over a pit?
I think so.
Okay.
Could be wrong.
Well, maybe we didn't see it then.
Yeah, maybe he saw it before they built the wooden floor there.
Oh. Yeah, okay.
I'm looking at a picture online right now. So yeah, maybe you saw something we did not see.
Okay, in a spiraling, chaotic arrangement. Well, when we were in the Bent Pyramid, there was a lot of this too, because it just looked like people were tunneling through parts of the pyramid. I mean, you saw that also in the Great Pyramid.
Yeah.
So basically what it looks like is core stones, core masonry that has been cut through by people later for whatever reason. So I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that a little more. But yeah, I guess if there was a wooden floor and we did sit in there, if there was a deep pit beneath that, it seems to me like the most likely thing is that somebody was just digging into the floor.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Who knows? Okay. This is from... he gives his name as Brother Snake Eyes. Egypt stone vases possibility. Snake Bros, welcome back from Egypt. You all have been knocking out the episodes since returning, and they've been great. Missed you guys. I'm writing because I think I see a possible analogy in the modern era to what you all saw with the fine stone vases that may explain at least part of the mystery of their purpose. In short, given that these vases are often found with extremely advanced and delicate stone items like the schist disc, which look more industrial somehow, the vases themselves might actually remind me a great deal of the skill demonstration projects apprentices of modern trades are required to craft as they advance or graduate. Given their great number, however, it also reminds me of the downstream economic activities one often sees with a concentration of skilled tradesmen. Apologies in advance for the additional length here, but fleshing this out a bit with a personal example may illustrate this possible connection better. My grandfather built nuclear submarines at Mare Island Naval Shipyard during the Cold War, having started as a skilled trade apprentice after World War II. The shipyard had numerous apprenticeships across all sorts of trades, including advanced and arcane welding specialities, complex machining, and tool and die making. One of the most interesting to me personally, and that may most parallel with what was going on with the stone vases, was pattern making. Before computer-aided drafting or CNC machining, engineers would design a part, such as a propeller or a gear, and pattern makers would craft it out of wood for proof of concept to work the bugs out, or as the exact pattern that a machine would precisely duplicate in metal. It was an advanced form of precision woodworking and was the best paid trade on Mare Island, given the skill and competence required and the risks riding on it at sea. But like all the skilled trades there, they required long apprenticeships just to become minimally competent, let alone become a master of that trade. Over 5 years in some cases. All of these apprenticeships required increasingly complex demonstrations of skill by each apprentice as they advanced through their training and graduation, like making increasingly advanced tools, instruments, or complex shapes or structures under tight timelines. Interestingly, quite often they might be decorative, like a model of a submarine for a machinist, or with basic welding, cutting up sheet metal and rods and welding it all up into a metal rose and its vase. Critically, they also often had to demonstrate a command of more primitive, less advanced skills before being taught the use of the more advanced equipment. And that's what these stone vases reminded me of, skill demonstrations of core skills needed for the even more advanced, complex, precision stone carving that you see in things like the schist disc, especially when you consider all the different materials the vases are made from and ultra-hard inclusions so many of them have, while the industrial parts look to be from cleaner materials from the few I've seen photos of. The materials and dimensions in the vases aren't ideal for durability or ease of production, but damn, do they demonstrate how good the craftsman was at their job. Without the even more delicate and precise stone industrial items found with the vases, it wouldn't even cross my mind the vases might be skill demos, but they seem connected. The sheer number of them found, though, over 60,000, wasn't it, is what made me think of pattern makers specifically. All around the San Francisco Bay Area, tens of thousands of some of the finest wooden duck decoys ever carved for actual use by hunters were made over the decades by Mare Island pattern makers.
That's cool.
Before being made obsolete by plastic decoys. These guys made a regional commercial industry with their skills, either on the side or in retirement, making duck decoys and other items to sell. I personally have a couple that are worth several $1,000s each to collectors that were used in the 1940s and 50s. These guys also made small wooden models of each submarine that launched from Mare Island, given to each of the original plank owners who were on the maiden voyage, which I also have 2 of, which are also worth money to certain collectors. These items survive because people see a decorative value in them, but none of the wooden ring gear or propeller patterns they carved do. So, were the vases actually skill demos or part of an industry that arose around that concentration of skilled industrial trades involved in what it took to build the pyramids? Did some skill demo in the precision acoustical stonecraft shop later lead to a decorative stone vase industry?
That's pretty cool, dude.
Obviously, it's all speculation and hard to say, but I do believe I see a parallel in apprenticeships and human nature. So many vases may have survived for the simple reality that after a cataclysm, there would be both intrinsic and decorative value in a stone vase in virtually any home, especially centuries after the skills to make one were lost, and basic containers were hard to come by, especially ones that would be airtight with wood plugs and beeswax. As their value increased with time and the wealth and economic power of a post-cataclysm civilization evolved, they may simply have become highly sought-after status items, slowly accumulating and concentrating in the hands of the elites. But why so few items like the schist disc? Well, people gonna people, and a bunch of 1,000-year-old delicately carved stone subwoofer trumpet parts just lying around everywhere, as indecipherable as a pile of old car parts behind a barn, may simply have not held any perceived value or usefulness, except the few that bizarrely seem to look like ashtrays. But overall, maybe they were just seen as a bunch of fun reactive targets for bored ancient redneck kids to break with their slings. Glass and windows are the first to go in other unsupervised places today. So that's it from here. Apologies for the length of the email, but thought the observation and backstory may be worth sharing for insight. Thanks again for doing what you do, bros, and keep snaking, from Brother Snake Eyes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I really like that.
I do too.
And, we have a little bit of experience with this. When we first moved to Texas, there was on the ranch property we moved to, there was a shop that did exactly what you described. It was an old shop that was designed for designing airplane parts, as far as I was told, what I remember, for airplanes in World War II and Cold War era. And they had one half of the shop was for the woodworking and the other half was for the metalworking, right?
You make I don't know.
That's what I remember. And that there was,
but you definitely would do that. They would make the parts out of wood first to get the concept. And then in a lot of cases, like Chris Dunn talked about this, the wood model
served as a template.
Could be a template.
Yeah.
Even for like they would have.
Yeah. It was some kind of tracing.
Yeah. It was like a CNC machine, but instead of a computer design, they had like a stylus type of thing that traced the curves on the wooden object.
Yeah. So they would perfect it out of wood as much as they could, and then build it, and then only then build it out of metal, which is much harder.
Because it could replicate it out of the metal.
Yeah.
Using the wood
template. Wood template. That's right.
That's really cool.
That was a very interesting shop.
Yeah.
It had been not in use for a long time, but we got to explore it and look around and stuff. So, yeah. I love the idea that those vases were like a side market for apprentices.
I mean, yeah, because people would want those. If you started making those, like when you were working, building up your skills and you were making these vases, be like, dude, that's awesome. Like, can I have that?
Yeah.
Can totally see that taking place.
Yeah.
And then they all start making vases.
Right.
Some of them never go on to do anything else.
Yeah, no need.
They could make their whole living on vase making.
Okay, this is from Ben. He says, salutations, slithering siblings. I was happy to find out from Spotify that I've spent 14,095 minutes with you this year.
Holy crap.
Managing to catch up on about 62 episodes and a couple of repeats because I can't wait for new episodes. I just wanted to thank you for giving something to look forward to each week. The last 2 years have been, really effed up. You guys are amazing, and I'm happy to have something between this show of yours and Cosmographia to keep me sane in the coming months. Keep up the great work, and snacks from Ben.
Thanks, buddy.
14,000 minutes. I guess Spotify did this thing, because I saw this in a bunch of places. Spotify did this thing this year where they would give you, here was your favorite, your top whatever, and they'd show you how much time you spent listening to it.
That's cool.
And so I had people sending me that screenshots of their Spotify screens, like, look, my top podcast is Brothers of the Serpent, and I'll listen to you guys for 300 and something hours or whatever this year. Wow. Okay. This one has a lot of alliteration. Let's see. This is from Shane. He says, thanks for doing the do. Hey, Oroboro bros. So I recently stared into the eyes of the serpent and have thusly become mesmerized. Your show is hitting so many chambers of my hungry heart that I might spontaneously sprout a second me. A ventricular Visigoth of variable verisimilitude. Don't you know? Why all the V's? Why Velikovsky, of course. I found your podcast by searching for his name on one of the big purveyors of prodigious podcastery. And fortunately, your show popped up. So I burned through the Laird Scranton Velikovsky Heresies deep dive, and then the Velikovsky Earth in Upheaval run. And now I'm mainlining your William Bramley Gods of Eden series. And man, you fellas make for a great listen. Anywho, just wanted to thank you for presenting such a greatly entertaining, informative, and thought-stimulating, well-produced show. You have my support and gratitude henceforth. Stacks from Shane.
Thank you, Shane. V for Vendetta.
Yes, just lots of V's. Let's see. Sound and resonance. Okay, this one is a book. This is a total book. You guys sometimes should just write books. This is from Mike. Greetings, snakes. Welcome back from Egypt, and kudos on the recent episodes. As usual, content par excellence. Sebastian is fantastique, and given that my wife is a Scandinavian, I truly appreciate his sense of humor and vocal patois. All I have is this hand cream.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Oh, man.
I really appreciate the deep dive on the subject of resonance as it refers to structures of Egyptian antiquity. I have a feeling that this is only the beginning, as I can hear the light bulbs going off in real time as y'all are recording. I think you would be fascinated to see the parallels of these discoveries echoed in history of other cultures as well. I am currently deeply involved in a years-long comparative study between Lord Shiva, Dionysus, and Zagreus? Not sure how to say that one. Too many interesting and poignant links culturally and cosmologically to list without going from cliff notes to book. Write a book! But I'll hit the highlights where they are pertinent to your recent discussions. Profound links between architectural and religious technology exist between the linga, the pyramids, obelisks, and the omphalos, as expressed in Delphi. The technology is still being used today as it was, or in a similar fashion to antiquity, in India with Shaivism and Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma. Yeah, lots of words here I don't know how to say. Sound plays a key role in the ancient consecration science, as does the manifestation of solid alchemical mercury linga. Interesting connection to sound, density of matter, and mercury. Very, very real. Not only have I seen it done, but I have ruined many a vessel making a small, shitty mercury linga myself. The short of it is that one would consecrate a space and receive unbelievable benefit from just sitting in it as a form of worship. The ancient temple marking the temporal, the passage of time spent in the space. He says, check out the attached screenshot highlighting the internal structure on an ancient holy relic in India, 100% some sort of resonance technology. Also, chanting and mantras. One could argue that one of the oldest and most important of Shiva mantras is the unpronounceable mantra, or the Rudra mantra from the Rig Veda. It's not actually unpronounceable. It's just unpronounceable for me. Mahamariti Yuaniyawayaja. I don't know.
That was the unpronounceable mantra.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's unpronounceable. He says it's also called the Rudra mantra from the Rig Veda. He says, I recite this daily in keeping with practice a total of 108 times, which takes roughly 43 minutes. 108 times.
20 seconds, maybe? 3 minutes, 20 seconds.
I can only share personal anecdotal evidence of the bizarre resonance experienced during the recitation of this mantra, although there may be more documentation or experiences out there. It is intense. When recited properly, shortly into the third recitation, you begin to feel a resonance at the base of your spine, or root chakra. This resonance spreads through one's whole body, bringing with it an intense warmth, sense of bliss, and mild intoxication. I was very quietly reciting on the second floor of our home recently, not much louder than a whisper, and my wife came bolting up the stairs to ask me to quiet down because it was so loud and shaking the chandelier above our dining table. Very intense. The only thing I can describe it as is like the constant drone of a didgeridoo in the background of the chanting, produced gutturally. Don't chant this while operating heavy equipment. Are the precise pronunciation requirements for Sanskrit part of the blueprint of how to operate this technology? Like I said, it only works like this when I nail it. One of the reasons I started looking to India is that apart from some Mughal, I guess, Mughal, I don't know how to say it, and British nastiness, there is an unbroken line of practice to antiquity, potentially even prehistory. Don't be afraid to venture off the beaten path a little bit to other less investigated areas. There may be data, practice, and principle that can validate your work in Egypt and elsewhere. I'll shoot y'all my work when I publish it, as it may be some interest. I think you would dig the links between the Thyrsus of Dionysus and the Indica Cola, real etymology of the word Thyrsus. Cosmologically, I'm at a bit of a dead end with a very important date to me, Plato and Dionysus, 6,778 BCE. Throwing it out there in case it may make sense to anyone else out there. And he says, crap, I turned it into a book after all. Yes. Okay.
You remember the Thyrsus?
The Thyrsus, yeah, the
That
staff.
staff that he has with the pine coney thingy.
Yep. And he says, P.S. I'm currently opening a restaurant in Arizona. If y'all are ever in Phoenix or Scottsdale, dinner's on me. From Mike.
All right.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm fully aware that there's a huge hole in our ability to make comparative mythology comparisons because we don't, at least I don't, have a very good grasp at all of Indian myth.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Same.
And it's, I don't know. It looks impenetrable to me. Like, when I look at it, I'm just like, what is happening? So I don't know. Like, yes, we've talked about this before. We need to get some experts on to talk about it. But even when I listen to experts, I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. Maybe it's because I can't parse the names. I have no idea. It's, they're like what you did in here. You're throwing out all this stuff and I'm like, okay, I don't even know what any of that means. So
yeah,
that's part of it. I know what a linga is. That's about it. But thank you for the email and interesting experiences. And yeah, some of that, the chanting stuff you were talking about and the experiences there and how it felt reminded me a little bit of what Soraya says about Kundalini, which is also.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. This is called Acoustics and Resonance Part 2 from Michael. Different Michael. Dear siblings of the Danger Noodle. Another great episode, though I think I missed half of the audio clips by only having one earbud in at work. My belief is that you guys are measuring the Serapeum in the wrong way. You must lay in the box, close the lid, and have the harmonizers stand at the nubs. Caution, this may heal all that ails you or liquefy your innards. The scoops are simply where Johnson's, who paid off the guards to sneak in, couldn't hit the right notes and cracked the box. I always think back to Grimerica's first episode on Coral Castle. Ed Leedskalnin said he used the same techniques as the Egyptians, and the body could be healed inside a pulsating magnetic field. Not sure if that's anywhere close to resonance, just a thought. Keep up the great work, Mike, a.k.a. Human Launchpad.
Yeah. Yeah, I closed one of the lids. Did it just by myself.
Yeah.
Just got it in the box, grabbed the lid.
Shut it.
Just shoved the 30-ton lid closed.
Right.
No problem.
Yeah. But on the other hand, even though it's said jokingly, we agree in a sense that you don't really know what's going on with these boxes if it's resonance-based, if the lids are supposed to be closed when it's operating properly.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And here's another email that promises to be short and delivers. It's called Short Email from the old man from scene 23. It's a lovely scene.
It's a lovely scene.
Yeah, with some excellent acting. Okay. Hello, Snaky Boys. In the interest of brevity, here's a quick thought. I was talking about pyramids with my 9-year-old daughter. She hasn't been corrupted by the standard model yet and has yet to be inducted into the Snake Bros School of Ignorance, thus has a completely fresh perspective on giant desert triangles. I was explaining that we don't know how or why they were built, and I asked her what she thought they were, for, and she said something interesting. They look like they are there to point at or towards something. Curious, right? Immediately reminded me of Robert Bauval's work, As Above, So Below. Regards, the old man from scene 23. Oh, and almost forgot. Snacks!
Yep, that's a good point. No pun intended.
Yeah. Have you done that with Soul? What are these for? Just ask him randomly what the pyramids are for.
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. See what he says.
Yeah.
He'll probably tell you that there's a treasure chest inside of a better sword.
Exactly. It's a better sword.
Okay, this is from Nick, and it is called My Highly Doubtful Theory. Dear Snake Bros, as I'm sitting here consuming your promised 33% brain expansion while also consuming my own homegrown 33% brain expansion, I finally decided to write out my thoughts on everything I've heard on your show. Forgive me if this is rambling, but this is my first time writing all this down. I have been a devout listener for months, and as I work around loud machines and have a pair of Bluetooth ear protection headphones, your unique view of the world has definitely given me an incredible amount to think about, and I'd like to share some of those thoughts. As I've been jumping around in the episodes based on what title caught my fancy that morning, I've noticed several themes that seem to run through the show as we explore the possible history of everything. The UFO episodes, hybridization, Bramley, synchronicity through major world religions, and the occult. These all seem to be puzzle pieces to a puzzle that was frozen, flooded, burned, forgotten, warped, and finally dug up and turned into what we call history and culture today. So enough rambling, on to my half-baked theory. I posit this. The custodians were and are an alternate form of life, I won't try to say what, with the limited ability to interact with our realm. For whatever reason, they needed more access to what we call the physical world. In this realm, there were primitive life forms that had the basic ability to do what the custodians needed. They manipulated the DNA and matter vibration of strings to instill those life forms with some of their own spectrum or whatever, and create the gods as we can remember them as a race. Those gods couldn't resist the genetic pull of reproduction and interbred with the original life form to create mankind's distant ancestors. The genetic code was broken up and the ability to act as gods was lost. As humanity evolved and the population exploded, the custodians attempted to destroy their experiment run wild. Humanity survived, though, and the population continues to grow. Go back to the hybridization of gods and life form. Think about these godlike genes that were lost because of it. But they weren't lost, they just got mixed up, and they're still tucked away as the population continues to grow and combine genes in new and different ways. What if occasionally those genes combined right enough that a person was granted abilities to interact with the other dimensional entities / custodians? Imagine the custodians waiting frantically on the other side, tracing genetic lines like scientists scrambling to stop a runaway experiment. And when those genes combine well enough, they're able to influence and work with that person to direct humanity to its end because they can't fix it now. Think of people like Saint Germain and John Dee and maybe even Hitler. On the other side, there could be another group that wants humanity to be allowed to live, religious leaders, secret societies, etc., working to counter those who want destruction. The eternal war played out against and for and by humans in obvious and insidious ways. I don't know, guys. That's about it. Sorry for rambling. It's been percolating for a while. I'm sure there's stuff I've thought of that ties in beautifully, but that's the framework for my thoughts. Thank you guys for everything you do. Keep up the great work, and Merry Saturnalia. Snakes from Nick.
That's quite a theory you have there, sir.
Yeah, he calls it his highly doubtful theory. Yeah, that's one of those things where you just say, could be. Don't know.
Don't know, buddy.
All right, is it break time?
It is.
Okay. Well, we're actually doing really good. Only got 3 emails left.
All right.
So we'll take a break, come back, knock those out, and then we'll tackle some Petrie.
Snacks! Back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers of the Serpent Podcast, and this is a segment of Unnamed from the what's the name of it?
Kings and Thieves?
No. God dang. Prisoner. From the Prisoner EP.
Yeah. Can be found on
Couldn't
Spotify
think with that
here.
loud music in my ears. Yeah, it should be on Spotify, but it's got lyrics. That's just a little loop of the intro. Anyway, continue on with the old listener communications.
Okay, here is a Patreon message. This is from Aaron. Says, "Greetings, Snake Bros. I'll try to keep this short. After listening to the latest episodes regarding the resonant properties of the granite boxes in the, I always forget how to say this, Serapeum, have you considered or discussed the possibility that they were designed as a way to absorb and or dissipate the waves created in earthquakes? If this area of the world was a repository of knowledge, one would hope the ancients would go to lengths to protect the land as well as the buildings from seismic waves. Could the boxes be tuned to absorb P waves and S waves, which have a frequency range of 1 to 100 hertz, bouncing the waves through the granite boxes, preventing the splitting of the bedrock below? Thanks for all you do."
I
think-
doubt that.
Yeah.
But I think I can imagine that the boxes may have been built to withstand.
Yeah, because it seems like those waves have to travel through the bedrock to get to the boxes, so
Yeah.
I think it would be too late at that point to... I'm not sure. But yes, to withstand the earthquakes, I agree. Right?
Yeah.
And what do you think would happen if that... The thing that would have the hardest time surviving the earthquakes would be the tunnels.
Right. But they would, they would obviously absorb some of the energy, but that wouldn't be enough.
Right.
Not nearly enough. In my humble opinion.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, we're not geophysicists, but it doesn't seem like it would be enough. I don't know. But still, I love all these ideas, and we like to skirp them. So keep sending them in.
Send me your ideas, I shall destroy them.
And why can't I remember which way to say it?
It's Serapeum.
Serapeum. Yeah. But
we were calling it the Serapeum for a long time.
But when I'm reading it and I get to the word, I realize there's two ways to say it, and I don't remember which one is right. And then because I'm in reading mode, my brain won't turn it around.
It would be easier if there were three ways to say it.
Really?
Yeah, it is for me. When there's three options, it's pretty easy to remember the right one. But when there's only two, I switch which one is. It's like for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
I don't know why this happens to me.
It's like a brain freeze every time I get to the word when I'm reading it.
Yeah.
I'm like, which way do you say this? And it doesn't matter. Everyone knows what you're talking about either way.
Yeah.
Deconstructing UFOs. This is from Lewis.
It's Serapeum. Just kidding. It's Serapeum.
Not helping. Yeah, what happens to me is I think of Serapis. Right?
You mean Serapis?
It is actually pronounced Serapis, which is the weird merging Greek/Egyptian.
See, I don't
God.
have that problem because I don't know that guy.
So it's like Serapis, and I'm like, yes, that's how you say it. Serapeum. Serapis. Serapeum. So I don't know. Anyway, this is from Lewis. We read one of his last week where he
just think of Yusuf's. Just imagine him saying it. Serapeum.
Yeah. Yeah, Serapeum, which to me sounds like Serapeum.
Okay, well, doesn't to me.
Yeah, it sounds like he's putting the emphasis on the second. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's we did with this with Ben. He played Yusuf saying it over and over. I'm like, yeah, he's saying Serapeum. He's like, no, he's saying, or I'm saying he's saying Serapeum, and he's like, nope, he's saying Serapeum. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's gone on too long.
Yeah. Okay, deconstructing UFOs. This is from Lewis Zmog in the Discord, and we read one of his emails last week. He was the one that wrote in about the Phoenix Lights.
Oh, okay.
So he says, deconstructing UFOs and demons. Happy holidays, Snake Bros. I enjoyed all the catching up with Brothers of the Serpent, Cosmographia, and Uncharted X after the fall hiatus for research and exploration. It was well worth the wait, and last week's Sode number 224 was another classic mind expander. So that would have been deconstructing demons. I no longer feel the need to skirp the pop ufology. as the bigger picture has become apparent due to continued exposure to Snake Brothers mind expansion. At first, I allowed myself to be distracted by the candy cane pop culture ufology references. But then, as the dive went deeper, I realized that Marty G had strung together a massive, icky, sticky, mega-sized twine ball of folklore, demons, paranormal phenomena, ufology, and conspiracy theories that the more one unwinds, the more one becomes entwined and knotted up in the interrelationships of the various phenomena. The more I listened, the more I began to comprehend both the madness and wisdom of Marty's comprehensive "take out of this what you will" look at the bulk phenomena sans the mint candies. Perhaps later a dive into Edgar Cayce may be in order to tie some knots between Egypt, demons, and Atlanteans. We are sequestered behind a veil of manufactured reality. Our consciousness exists within an illusion of carefully defined perceptions. Much remains to be discovered beyond our current limitations. Snakes! From Lewis.
So is he saying that...
I don't know what he's saying. I'm not sure.
Well, I think what I thought...
I'm joking.
I thought he is saying basically that he was always like annoyed by perhaps or arguing with the nuts and bolts pop culture type of UFO.
His response to the UFO thing was that I guess he's saying he keeps being distracted by the pop culture version of UFO,
which is the nuts and bolts craft stuff. What's the pop culture version?
Yeah, I guess what you would call mainstream ufology, which is, the
Green Men with nuts and bolts craft.
Yeah, nuts and bolts craft, and he's like, okay, I see what you're doing. You're taking this way farther than that and digging into it in a way that he hadn't heard really before. Okay. Yeah, he said, I allowed myself to be distracted by the candy cane pop culture ufology references. So because we use some of the same terms, it's distracting, I guess, which is, that happens. You have to use the terms that everybody uses.
Okay.
But yes. I guess what he's saying is he's now seeing the bigger picture of Marty's take, which is the point. That's what we're bringing Marty onto the show for. To me,
we're not bringing him on for my take. That's for sure.
It's all bullshit. And one last one. This one's also a response to Marty. This is also from the old man from Scene 23.
Again.
Yes. This one's called Light in the Sky. Skirp this one, Marty. Good afternoon, Snaky Boys. Listening to episode 225 with Marty and the discussion about the Phoenix Lights. Contemplating the requirement to look for a terrestrial explanation for an anomalous sighting, I have decided to tell you about something I saw way back in 2000 when I was in the Australian Navy. Part of my role was to act as a lookout for both commercial and military vessels and aircraft. On top of a very solid training in identifying various types of craft by day and night, I had countless hours of experience actively doing this work in real time. A clear night, somewhere in the Coral Sea, at approximately 03:45 in the morning, I was conducting a handover with my relief as lookout, and we were having a bit of a chat and admiring the starry sky above us. As we were both looking up and to the south, I saw a shooting star tracking from the east at approximately 45 to 50 degrees of elevation, and while I was pointing it out to my mate, we both saw it stop and change direction by about 120 degrees and continue without a noticeable change of speed. The light proceeded to repeat this process for 4 more times with various angles and subsequent distance traveled, after which it seemed to travel away from the Earth and disappear. We both looked at each other and said, "What the F was that?" To say we were quite stunned is an understatement. This whole process took less than 5 seconds and remains as clear to me today as it was then. We both reported it and spoke about it with our shipmates, to which we received the typical "sure you did" and "you're full of shit" from most people. I can assure you I had not even given UFOs any thought prior to that moment. It certainly opened my eyes, that's for sure. That being said, I do apply a solid amount of skeptitude to most accounts because of, well, humans. And try as I might, I cannot account for the behavior of that shooting star. Anyway, lads, keep up the brain-expanding work in 2022. Oh, and by the way, snakes! Regards, the old man from scene 23. So yeah, this is I feel like this is what Marty was saying was that not that accounts like yours are worthless. It just, he's not sure what it adds to the argument other than plenty of people see things like this that can't be explained, especially people like you who are trained to know what you're looking at in the sky in terms of aircraft. So, but on the other hand, you know, it'd be interesting since you were at a ship or on a ship or whatever, was there a radar return? Could there be any other correlations that would make this case have more things to dig into other than just recording it down as like, here are two guys who saw something that they couldn't explain even though they're trained observers, which is a data point, right? But let's say you took a cell phone video of that and you posted it online. How much worth would that be? Because everybody would just skirp it or say that you photoshopped it or whatever, even though you can't Photoshop video. People always say this, you know. So it's like, how much worth does this have other than saying, when you believe this person isn't lying, which I think you're not, you know, take it at face value. But on the other hand, in your own account, you say, I don't believe these kinds of reports because, well, humans. So that's exactly what Marty is trying to say about those kinds of sightings. You're saying, I had one, I know it was real because I was there, but I don't really believe these accounts from other people because people are people. So in the long run, the difference it makes is on you. It makes the difference to you because you know the experience was real, but all you can do is tell people about it. And in general, people are like, well, people make stuff up, just like you do with these kinds of accounts from other people. Am I making sense?
I don't know. Was he saying he doesn't believe other people's accounts? I was too caught up in my head thinking about what Australians call UFOs.
He says,
it's like sauce about or something. I don't know.
What?
Euphies?
Okay. Kyle's coming up with jokes, which is why he doesn't understand anything that's happening right now.
I totally I blanked out.
Euphies.
I just want to know. What do they call them?
Right. So Kyle isn't any help in this conversation.
I mean, I heard the whole account of the thing.
He says, that being said, I do apply a solid amount of skirpitude to most accounts because of, well, humans.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm trying to say, yes, that's what Marty's saying.
Yeah.
Not that your specific account is a lie. It's just that in general, you don't know what to do with them, except to take them down as data and say, okay, here's a report from a guy who is a trained observer of things in the sky. And here he says he saw something he couldn't explain, and so did somebody else. The next step is, since you're on a ship, and presumably it was a military ship, were there other correlations like radar return and so on and so forth? Did other ships cite it? Were you in a group of ships? Did other people on other ships see it? You know, I'm just saying, like, his what he's starting out with here is, you know, skirp this one, Marty, a light in the sky. And I think, and I could be making this up, but I think that's a response to Marty saying on the last episode, you know, lights in the sky are like, what do you do with those? And I'm saying that he's like, okay, here's a lights in the sky thing. And at the very end, he explains why. What do you do with those? By saying he applies skirpitude to most accounts of that because of, well, humans. So yeah. So you're faced with believing the person or saying that they're not believable. And just there's no way to know.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like it's a complex issue. On the one hand, I listen to that account. I have no reason to disbelieve him.
No, because I definitely have seen something
right.
very similar to that.
Right. So in the end, I think that those data points, those kinds of lights in the sky sightings, when they have no other kind of correlation or whatever, is like what you can see is like, here's how many people have claimed to see something. That's about as far as you can go with those kinds of sightings. And what does that tell you?
I don't know. Because a whole bunch of those people could just be
making stuff up.
Making shit up.
Yes. or misunderstanding stuff that is easily explained, except in his account, he's a trained observer. That doesn't mean that he's a trained observer in like meteorological phenomena or in, astronomical phenomena. I'm not saying that that's what those things were, but he's specifically trained in at least one thing that people can mistake for UFOs, which is aircraft in the sky. Mm-hmm. So we can probably rule out, if we take him for granted, we can probably rule out that he was seeing an aircraft that he should have been able to identify but couldn't for some reason. Are there other explanations? I don't know. I'm just saying it's complicated, and I wouldn't.
And he wasn't alone, so
Yeah, that's right. So he couldn't. He's not like rubbing his eyes and going, "Did I really see that?"
Yeah. Then that was the same situation with me. It's like there were other people there, and I immediately, when it was over, asked everybody what they saw.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was consistent. There was a few little inconsistencies, but
yeah,
for the most part, it was the same.
Right. And then of course, what happens? He says he goes down and he starts telling other shipmates, and they're all like, "Yeah, sure, buddy." So they don't even believe him. Right. So people that he's interacted with and know what he's trained for are like, "Whatever, bro."
Yeah. Because they all give each other untold bucket loads of shit in the Navy.
Right.
So they probably made fun of him for months after that.
Yeah. Yep. They're all, they're playing the X-Files theme from their phones whenever they pass him.
Yeah.
I know. I understand. The question is did they really believe him or not? Or is this a way to just be like, sure, whatever, and not think about it? Or just give each other shit? I have no idea. What happens in a situation like that? Where like somebody really well, and you have no reason to think is lying, tells you something, and then you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, are you just giving him shit?
Some people just don't care, and they just want the opportunity to give somebody shit.
That's right.
They just want to make fun of you.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that what Fravor said too? Commander Fravor, the guy who saw the mint candy, the Tic Tac. Yeah. He was like telling his co-pilot, he was like, when we get back to the ship, we're going to get maximum crap for this.
Yeah. Maximum crap.
That's right. Maximum shit.
That's the way of it.
Yeah. So I thought it was a great email because number one, it's a fascinating story, and on the other hand, he explains in the story why this kind of story, while fascinating, is just like Marty was saying at this point. What do you do with it? And I think in terms of what Marty is trying to do in studying the phenomenon is like lights in the sky aren't that big of a deal at this point.
Okay.
Or not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal. I shouldn't have said that. It's just that like it's not something you can really use to study it except to say, okay, so here's the number of people who claim to see this stuff.
I mean, I kind of have the same question about all of the accounts. What do you do with it? I mean, it's like, yeah, you can look at it all.
Yeah.
But, I wouldn't say it's any less, like seeing lights in the sky is any less legit, or what do you do with it, type of stuff than any of the other types of accounts.
It's because there's no other data.
Well, then the only thing that you can say is not in that category is the stuff where an actual machine picked up something.
Yeah.
So that it's no longer...
Or it gets close and you see a structured craft, which is not a lights in the sky encounter. Or it gets even closer.
But who's seeing the structured craft? The same people that are seeing lights in the sky. It's just people. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. But there's in the case of structured craft, there's more data. Just in the fact that you can say, well, it looked like it's possible that the way you describe that structure, it's some kind of secret military project. Or the way it moved, even though it may look like a flying wing, flying wings don't do that. So there's something weird happening here, Like the last week we read the one where the guy was like, I saw some lights in the sky and then 11 black helicopters flew past, right? That's a different, it's got a little bit more information there, which you can make parallels to other cases.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I still think they're interesting accounts, and I love.
Yeah, I do too.
I love to hear them. I love hearing people's accounts of stuff like this, or anything else weird.
What the hell are the flashing things?
Oh yeah, those
What are
flashes.
flashers?
I don't know. I don't know what the flashers are, especially when they happen more than once in the same spot.
Yeah, there was one that I watched for like 30 minutes in the same spot, flashing over and over and over and over again.
Right. And since it happens in the same spot, it's not a satellite, or whatever.
Yeah. So
I mean, geosynchronous satellites maybe, but they're way out there. Could they make a flash like that? We have to look into that because
maybe.
they do move, but they make these little tiny figure eights. But maybe over the course of 30 minutes, you wouldn't notice it had moved because it's geosynchronous. But they're like between 25 and 30 something thousand miles away from the surface of the Earth. So will
I don't know.
Communication satellite make?
Is it out there just spinning?
Yeah. Do they rotate? I don't know.
And it's like spinning every 30 seconds or something. I mean, it wasn't even regular.
Right.
It was like I'd watch it and get, every 30 something seconds for a while, and then it was like a minute or a couple of minutes. Or, it wasn't. And then it didn't. Then it went away for a number of minutes, and then it came back, and then it starts doing it again at a certain number of.
That sounds like, if you're going to come up with something, an irregularly shaped object tumbling in 3 axes that has reflective surfaces, right?
Yeah, and different levels of brightness when it flashed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
not moving,
the reflective
not
surface,
moving compared to the background stars.
right? Which implies geosynchronous, which is possible. I just don't know. Like, can those satellites flash bright enough?
No, that's. Well, I guess if it was geosynchronous, it would be moving compared to the background stars because the background stars are moving compared to the Earth.
It's just really slow.
Yeah, it's slow.
Yeah.
Maybe not noticeable
Right.
over 30 minutes. I don't know. Weird
But
stuff.
yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It should move over time, even if it's geosynchronous, because we're rotating.
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, I love all the account. Anybody who wants to write in about weird experiences they've had, I love to read that stuff. Whether it's about UFOs or something else, we got the accounts from what was he, the captain of the Uinta Basin Snake Force, writing in about his experiences camping out there with his wife and the deer. That was a weird email.
Weird stuff.
Yeah, and Space Ramen Shaman writing in about his experiences. I love that stuff. So if you guys have stuff like that, write in about it. It's great.
Yep. And also, wingalos or
He's still trying to
tell me what the Australians call UFOs.
Winglows.
Wingalos.
This is the UFO is an odd name sort of thing.
Door flies. I don't know.
Euphies.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the emails. What do you got? We ready to tackle? We take a break and come back and tackle some Petrie?
Let's do some Petrie.
All right.
Pyramids.
We've rambled long enough about this.
Alrighty. We'll be right back.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen, the Brothers of the Serpent podcast, second half of the show, and we're going to tackle some Petrie. And we were talking during the break if any of that stuff in the responding to the last email made any sense. So if it didn't, just skip it.
I'm sorry. I went the joke angle, you went the serious angle. I can't think and listen at the same time.
And apparently the serious angle I took is not the angle you were expecting. So. I may have completely misread what was happening in that email. So
no, I don't think so. I doubt it. All right. So going back to pyramids and temples of Giza from Petrie, William Matthew Flinders Petrie. This segment, probably the last segment that I want to read from the book, is a sketch of the history and design of the Great Pyramid. So, starting here, 164. At the close of the period of the Third Dynasty, the hill of Giza was a bare stretch of desert ground. And, of course, side note, this is standard model. Like, Petrie's, pretty solid in the standard model.
Wait, did we get beers for this?
No.
We don't have any beers.
We get, I got some.
Should we get some beers?
Yeah. All right, hold on.
All right, yeah.
Okay. We got beers.
We have beers and coffee.
And coffee. But, all right. So, where was I? At the close of the period of the Third Dynasty, the hill of Giza was a bare stretch of desert ground overlooking the Nile Valley. In ages long before this dawn of living history, that valley had been deeply scoured out in the great tract of limestone rocks through which it passes, scored by the deep and rushing stream which filled the whole width of it from cliff to cliff. This stream was fed along its course by cataracts dashing down through gorges on either side of it, and thus forming a series of cascades which continually ate further back into the cliffs of the great river. The present stream, meandering slowly in a channel washed out amid its mud flats, and covering its ancient limits with a few inches or feet of water, but once a year, would seem a mere ditch if compared with its former grandeur. In the days when the Fourth Dynasty arose, these changes were long past, and the valley would probably seem as familiar now to Prince Merit, Simnifer the architect, and the rest of the court of Khufu as it did in the days of their power. Above the then growing city of Memphis rose the low hills and cliffs of the desert on the Libyan side, and one of the higher parts of the edge of the desert, a bare wind-blown rise of hill, attracted the attention of Khufu for the site of his great monument. It is certainly the finest sight for miles on either side of it, and probably the happiness of the blessed West in contrast to the filthy East, and the nearness to the capital, Memphis, induced him to build here, even though the materials had to be brought from the higher and more commanding cliffs of the eastern bank. It may seem strange that the site chosen was not rather further from the edge of the cliff, and thus on a higher part of the rock. But the principle in the early days seems to have been to place the tomb as near to the home as possible. The tomb was looked on with pride and satisfaction. It was the place where a man would be periodically remembered and honored by his descendants. It was, as Aseskaf called his pyramid, the cool place, or place of refreshing, where the body would rest in peace until revivified. A character of the deep rock-hewn chambers most pleasing in such a climate. Hence we find the tombs clustered as thickly as possible where they actually look on the valley at Giza, and scattered less closely where but little of the sacred stream could be seen. And similarly, Khufu placed his pyramid on a slight rise of rock as close to the edge of the cliff as possible. To understand the purpose of the erection of the pyramids, it should be observed that each has a temple on the eastern side of it. Of the temples of the second and third pyramids, the ruins still remain, and of the temple of the Great Pyramid, the basalt pavement and numerous blocks of granite show its site. That Khufu's temple is more destroyed than the others is easily accounted for by the causeway of it being larger and more accessible from the plain than are the causeways of the temples of Khafra and Menkaure.
Wait, what causeway? Is there one?
I don't know.
Is there a causeway for the Great Pyramid?
That's what he's saying.
Okay.
It seems like the second pyramid has the greatest causeway, but he's saying
that goes to the Sphinx.
Is this when they called? No, because he is talking about the actual Great Pyramid.
I mean, maybe it's there. We didn't walk it if it is when we were there.
Yeah. But he's saying it's being larger and more accessible from the plain than are the causeways of the temples of Khafra and Menkaure.
Okay.
So it's more accessible, is what he's saying. So hence it would naturally be the first attacked by the spoilers. When in all the tombs of the Pyramid Age, we see that the kings are called the great gods and had more priests than any of the original deities, it is easy to understand the relationship of a sumptuous temple to each of the royal pyramids. The worship of the deified king was carried on in the temple, looking toward the pyramid which stood on the west of it, the blessed west, in quotes, the land of souls. So I guess that's something to do with Egyptian mythology, the blessed west and the filthy east, because they're in quotes. So I don't know what that means, but could just be Petrie.
Yeah, the filthy east.
Yeah, I know. Just as private individuals worship their ancestors in the family tombs, looking towards the false doors, which are placed on the west side of the tomb, and which represent the entrances to the hidden sepulchres. Sepulchre. 165. It has always been assumed that only the finer stone used for the casing and passages was brought from the eastern cliffs, and that the bulk of the masonry was quarried in the neighborhood. But no quarryings exist on the western side in the least adequate to yield the bulk of either of the greater pyramids. And the limestone of the western hills is different in its character to that of the pyramid masonry, which resembles the qualities usually quarried on the eastern shore. It seems, therefore, that the whole of the stones were quarried in the cliffs of Tura and Masara and brought across to the selected site. 166. The great amount of labor involved in quarrying and transporting such a mass of masonry even the casing has always been a cause of astonishment, but an expression in the traditions reported by Herodotus and a consideration of the internal economy of the country in the present day seem to explain it. In describing the transport of the stones, Herodotus expressly states that 100,000 men worked at one time. Quote, each party during 3 months, end quote. Now the inundation lasts rather more than 3 months in the present day, and during that time the inhabitants are almost idle. The land is covered with water, the cattle are fed on dry fodder and wander on the barren desert. But few hands are needed to regulate the flow of water into the dammed-up basins of the country, and the greater part of the population turn willingly to any employment they can get, or dream away their time in some cool shade. Here, then, is the explanation of the vast amount of labor extracted from a country of limited area. It was during the 3 months of the inundation that the idle hands were set to all the more routine of unskilled labor. And while the Nile was at its full height, rafts were busily employed in floating over the masses of hewn stone from the causeways at the quarries across the 5 miles width of waters to the Pyramid Causeway, about 7 miles further down the stream. It is noticeable that the period of 3 months is only mentioned in connection with the removal of the stones and not with the actual quarrying or building. On these labors, probably a large staff of skilled masons were always employed, though they were helped on by an abundance of unskilled labor for the heavy work of lifting and transport during the 3 months when the general population was out of work.
Yeah. Okay, here's the thing on the causeway. The Valley Temple of Khufu's pyramid complex was connected to a causeway which was largely destroyed when the workers' village was constructed. That's what they say on Wikipedia. The causeway led to the mortuary temple of Khufu. So they have this map showing where they think it was.
All right.
But it goes between the Eastern Cemetery and just above the 3 satellite pyramids there. So I don't know if it's still there, but I guess they said it was largely destroyed. So supposedly there was a causeway.
Yeah, so I think his point is just that people that were quarrying stone and stuff were just taking, it was the easiest path to take stuff.
You're right.
But I think the interesting thing to me about this is how he was there before the dam.
Yeah.
And so he saw the inundation and he saw how it affected the culture.
Right.
There was nothing to do.
Yeah.
While the rivers, you had water and desert. Mm-hmm. So you all year, the rest of the year, you're farming, you're working in the valley, you're like they're growing crops and then storing those crops away up high.
Yeah.
So that they can feed their cattle once the river's flooded.
Yeah.
And they all go up onto the higher, the uplands. And the cattle have nothing to graze. They're just wandering around in the desert and they have dry fodder that they feed them. So he's like, and then I guess they had areas where you can, where they dammed up the water that was flooded so that they could, I guess, use it for irrigation when the waters went down. But it's like that didn't take very much management. So most people were just out of work.
Yeah. So 3 months. Yeah, I've heard this. 3 months out of the year, you basically are, So it's a long vacation.
Yeah. So the thing I found fascinating about this is because he lays out this idea, and I think I heard on the what is it? The Revelation of the Pyramids, the idea that, or maybe it was Graham Hancock, that it's like they had to lay one stone every 2 minutes. They had to cut it out of the quarry, transport it, cut it to fit, raise it up, and fit the stone. One stone every 2 minutes in order to build this pyramid in 20 years.
Yeah, working 12 hours a day.
Yeah, working 12-hour days. Yeah. So
now you cut that down to like you're working 12 hours a day, 3 months out of the year. How many stones do you have to do?
Yeah, but so what he's suggesting is that there's a permanent group of masons that are working at the pyramid site, and then they
had this huge influx of labor for.
They have this massive force of labor for 3 months out of the year that can do all the transporting and rough cutting of these stones out of the quarries. Like, of course, you would have some skilled quarrymen over there, but you'd have like a ton of unskilled labor taking these stones, loading them up, moving them down the rafts, bringing them to the site, and placing them at the site. Right. So suddenly the masons just have like this mountain of materials sitting next to the pyramid, and then they can start working on the stones. But he keeps going. So he says, the actual course of work then during the building of the pyramid would have been somewhat as follows. At the end of July, when the Nile had fairly risen, the levy of 100,000 men would assemble to the work. Not more than 8 men could well work together on an average block of stone of 40 cubic feet, or 2.5 tons, and the levies would probably be divided into working parties of about that number. If then each of these parties brought over 10 average blocks of stone in their 3 months' labor, taking a fortnight to bring them down the causeways at the quarries, a day or two of good wind to take them across the stream, 6 weeks to carry them up the pyramid causeway, and 4 weeks to raise them to the required place on the pyramid, they would easily accomplish their task in the 3 months of high Nile. They would thus be at liberty to return to their own occupations in the beginning of November, when the land was again accessible.
So saying that if 8 guys can do all that with one block, and you've got 100,000 people, and you divide them up.
So each party brought over 10 average blocks.
Yeah.
Each party of 8 guys did 10 blocks in 3 months.
Okay.
See, that makes it a little more believable.
Yeah.
Right? You got 8 dudes, and they work together on maybe 4 of them work together on one block, and another 4 work on another block, and then together they raft them over and raise them up and do all that stuff. So he goes on. Of course, the actual distribution of labor would be more specialized, but this outline will show that such a scale of work would suffice for the complete building of the Great Pyramid in 20 years, as stated by Herodotus.
Well, that's 12,500 teams of dudes. If there's 100,000 guys, and we divide them up into teams of 8.
So 12,500 times 10 gives you how many stones they bring over in 1 year.
Right. Well, now I'm thinking about bottlenecks. You can't have 12,000 teams of dudes on boats bringing rocks across, and I don't know.
I don't know how big that thing is when it's flooded.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But there could be. So, but he goes on. So, what does he say? We thus see that the whole of the material, and not merely the casing, could readily be obtained from the eastern shore, and that the levies need not have been employed during more than the 3 months when all ordinary labor was suspended. Besides these hosts of unskilled hands, there must have been a smaller body of masons permanently employed in quarrying the stone and in trimming it at the pyramid. And it is likely that a year's supply of stone would be kept on hand at the pyramid, on which the masons would work, and so the 3 months' supply of laborers would put up the stones which had been trimmed and arranged during the 9 months previously, while other laborers were engaging in bringing over a supply for the masons to work in the ensuing 9 months.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so the laborers bring over a bunch of roughly cut stones, and then the masons for the rest of the year cut them precisely.
Yeah, put marks on them for where they're supposed to go, plan the whole thing out.
Yeah.
And then you get a bunch of Johnsons over there the next year. They start
lifting them up, and then you got other Johnsons bringing
rough stones from across the river.
This system of employing all the unskilled labor of the country on public work when the lands were inundated. Private labor was impossible, and the Nile was in the fittest state for transport, is almost certain to have been followed in all the great works of the Egyptians. And the peculiarity of the country may go far towards explaining their capacity for executing vast public works. And I found that compelling.
Yeah.
That's a compelling argument to me. What the number of skilled that doesn't change the point, the argument that it must have been something that would serve them, right?
Yeah.
Like would they do this just to let's dig ditches and then bury them? They wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? It must have been something that they knew that was going to pay them back as a society.
Yeah.
So if great works alone can pay you back as a society, then maybe you just build giant triangles. I don't know. What the number of skilled masons was, we may well guess from the accommodation provided for them in the barracks behind the second pyramid. These barracks were used by the workmen of Khafra, but those of Khufu must have been equally numerous and have occupied in a similar space, if not indeed these identical dwellings. These barracks would hold 3,600 or 4,000 men easily. And as about 120,000 average blocks were required to be prepared every year, this would be only one block of stone prepared in a month by a party of 4 men, which would probably be the number of masons working together. Hence, this accommodation is really more than enough, and most likely a good deal of lifting and building work would be going on throughout the year beside the great supply of labor during the inundation. Thus we see that the traditional accounts that we have of the means employed in the building of the Great Pyramid require conditions of labor supply which are quite practicable in such a land, which would not be ruinous to the prosperity of the country or oppressive to the people, and which would amply and easily suffice for the execution of the whole work. 167. The site being chosen, it was carefully leveled, and the lengths of the sides were set out with great exactitude. How the angles were made square within 12 inches average error is difficult to see. The rock rising up irregularly in steps inside the masonry to some 25 feet high would render accurate diagonal measurements very difficult, unless indeed narrow trenches or passages were cut from corner to corner to measure through. So now he's jumping to, obviously,
how do they do the precision?
How do they do this precision layout with a giant mound in the middle of the site?
Right.
The setting out of the orientation of the sides would not be so difficult. And I didn't really understand it. Say, if a pile of masonry some 50 feet high was built up with a vertical side from the north to south, a plumb line could be hung from its top, and observations could be made to find the places on the ground from which the pole star was seen to transit behind the line at the elongations 12 hours apart. The mean of these positions would be due south of the plumb line and about 100 feet distant from it. On this scale, 15 seconds of angle would be about 1/10 of an inch and therefore quite perceptible.
So that's a version of the stick trick.
Yeah, he's giving you a way to orient the thing to the north. From several indications, it seems that the masons planned the casing, and some at least of the core masonry also, course by course on the ground. For on all the casing and on the core on which the casing fitted, There are lines drawn on the horizontal surfaces, showing where each stone was to be placed on those below it. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I think so.
So he's saying that each course was planned out on the ground. Like once the masons got their blocks there, they cut each one specifically to fit in a specific place.
Yeah.
And up on top of the course, the masons drew lines. Like, here's this stone is going to sit right here, and it's got these dimensions.
Yeah. So you'd have to mark, like, this is stone,
the north side.
This is stone B16.
Yeah.
And it goes in spot B16 on the pyramid.
That's right.
Which has been drawn out. Yeah.
Yeah. And he saw lines drawn on the stones in the courses where, okay, they made that stone to fit.
To fit this spot.
So it's like laying them out on the ground. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Where was I?
Well, we can take a break.
Oh, okay. Man, are you sure?
Well, the sands of time ran out. Or did we leave it going while we went and got beers?
Oh, yeah, we probably did.
That's what happened.
Yeah,
Keep going.
We still got 10 minutes. Oh, podcasting. Go podcasting. Let's see. Another indication of very careful and elaborate planning on the ground is in the topmost space over the king's chamber. There, the roofing beams were numbered and marked for the north or south sides. And though it might be thought that it could be of no consequence in what order they were placed, yet all their details were evidently schemed before they were delivered to the builder's hands.
Wait, is he saying that he saw marks on the roofing beams in the king's chamber?
That's what he's saying.
Okay.
There, the roofing beams were numbered and marked for the north or south sides. Didn't know that.
Yeah.
This care in arranging all the work agrees strikingly with the great employment of unskilled laborers during 2 or 3 months at a time, as they would then raise all the stones which the masons had worked and stored ready for use since the preceding season.
I don't know about that.
This means 169.
You would need at least a skilled supervisor for that kind of thing, right? I mean, you want...
Yeah, you get
the
labor. You get the labor to help you lift them.
Yeah, but you're going to need somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, if this is going on for 20 years and you're only doing it 3 months out of the year,
yeah,
and like your other job is farming, you're never going to get very good. You and 7 other guys bring 10 stones a year.
Yeah. And if they're all farmers, knowing the farmers we know, they're all going to argue with all the supervisors about how to do it best.
They might actually have better ideas. The means employed for raising such masses of stone is not shown to us in any representations. For the ordinary blocks of a few tons each, it would be very feasible to employ the method of resting them on 2 piles of wooden slabs and rocking them up alternately to one side and the other by a spar under the block, thus heightening the piles alternately and so raising the stone.
Yeah.
This would also agree with the mysterious description of a machine made of short pieces of wood, a description which is difficult otherwise to realize. So I don't know where that description is, but...
Yeah, you basically, you pick up one side and put a block or a piece of wood under it, and then you pick up the other side and put a piece of wood on it, and you just keep doing that back and forth, and it slowly lifts the block.
Or you do it more towards the center so that it's actually easy because you're using the weight of the rock as leverage.
Yeah. And then it falls off, and you have to start over.
This method would also be applicable to the largest masses that we know of in the pyramid, the 56 roofing beams of the king's chamber and of the spaces above it. These average 320 by 52 by 73 inches, or 700 cubic feet each, weighing therefore 54 tons, some larger, some less. No simple system but that of rocking would enable men to raise such a mass with only the help of crowbars. If such a block was put on 2 supports, say 30 inches apart, only 5 tons would have to be lifted at once, and this would be easily done by 10 men with crowbars. 6 such parties might raise the whole of these blocks in 1 year. I mean, he's saying it's easily done, but if they won't all be Petries, right? There'll be a lot of other types of men. But I mean,
How many wouldn't?
Look, this guy employed a lot of people,
Yeah.
unskilled labor, and they did all kinds of excavations. They moved large stones around. They did, so he kind of, you gotta trust his
I agree.
opinions on this a little bit.
Yeah. I agree.
I know that they didn't raise any, what is it, 50-ton,
How many wooden crowbars
54-ton
do you need?
blocks up 300 feet. I know that. I don't think they did any of that.
How many wooden crowbars do you need to lift 5 tons?
Well, he says that they have iron. Let's see.
Oh, he does. Okay, well, that's a huge difference in the standard model right there.
170.
Talking about meteorite iron.
That 170. That sheet iron was employed, we know, from the fragment found by Howard Weiss in the masonry of the South Air Channel.
Okay.
And though some doubt has been thrown on the piece merely from its rarity, yet the vouchers for it are very precise. And it has a cast of a nummullite on the rust of it, proving it to have been buried for ages beside a block of nummulitic limestone, and therefore to be certainly ancient. No reasonable doubt can therefore exist about its being really a genuine piece used by the pyramid masons, and probably such pieces were required to prevent crowbars biting into the stones and to ease the action of the rollers.
All right, so now we have iron crowbars and sheet iron to keep the crowbars from biting into the stone. All right.
Rollers. You could also make rollers out of iron.
Yeah, you can make great rollers out of iron.
The tools employed have been described in the chapter on the mechanical methods, which we read in a previous podcast. They comprised bronze saws over 8 feet long, set with jewels, tubular drills similarly set with jewels, and circular saws. These were employed on the granite work, and perhaps saws of a less costly nature on the limestone. The casing blocks were dressed by very fine picking or adzing. The system of using true planes smeared with ochre for testing the work shows with what nicety they examined their work and what care was taken to ensure its accuracy and truth.
Yeah, so like in History of Precision, where GMA was talking about when they're checking the flatness of a slab by rubbing chalk onto some flat surface and then running it across the top of the slab, and then the chalk gets into the high places.
That's right.
So he's saying that basically that they were using ochre to do that same thing.
Yep. Now this is cool too. The masons' waste chips were thrown away over the cliffs on both the north and south of the pyramid. And they form banks extending about 100 yards outwards from the original edge of the rock and reaching from top to bottom of the cliffs. Taking them all together, they are probably equal in bulk to more than half of the pyramid. This rubbish is all stratified at the angle of rest, about 400. I don't know what that means. And the different qualities of it thrown away on different days may be clearly seen. In one part, there will be a layer of large chips up to the size of a hand. A foot above that, a lot of fine dust and sweepings. Above that, perhaps more large chips, and here and there a layer of desert flints and sand, showing when a piece of desert ground had been cleared to get more space for working. Among all this rubbish are pieces of the workmen's water jars and food vessels, of which I collected 100 or more fragments, mixed with chips of wood, bits of charcoal, and even a piece of string. Where is this charcoal? I wonder.
Oh, yeah.
He's a piece of string, which Petrie says had probably been used in patching up a rubbish basket. All these were obtained from pits which had been lately made in the oldest part of the heap, close to the edge of the cliff, and beyond which a thickness of some dozens of yards of waste had been shot out. There is thus a certainty that these remains show us the true mason's waste and rubbish, as thrown away by the builders and stretching out from the cliff in lines of tip, like a modern half-finished embankment. By means of this bank of waste, the space around the Great Pyramid was largely increased in appearance, though it was not solid ground for building. and the tops of the rubbish heaps were smoothly leveled down in the nearer parts so that their junction to the rock can hardly be traced. I wish I would have read this book before we went there.
Research after the fact.
Yeah. Should we take a break now? Should I read this next segment? It's short.
Yeah, go ahead.
171. During the course of building, there was evidently a great change in the style of the work, a change, however, belonging more to the builders than to the masons. The pavement, lower casing, and entrance passages are exquisitely wrought. In fact, the means employed for placing and cementing the blocks of soft limestone weighing a dozen or to 20 tons each with such hair-like joints are almost inconceivable at present, and the accuracy of the leveling is marvelous. But in the higher parts, the gallery, for instance, it is far from such excellence, and the upper part of it is very askew and irregular, the ramp surface being tilted more than an inch in a width of 20 inches. And did you notice that? I didn't notice. So he's like the ramp of the Grand Gallery itself is like tilted to one side, an inch and 20 inches. Of course, it was covered with boards.
Yeah, we were walking on a ramp.
Yeah. So he says, in the antechamber, the granite has never been dressed down flat, and defective stones are employed. Where the limestone was very bad, it was roughly plastered over, and many parts are strangely rough. In the king's chamber, the masonry is very fine, both in its accuracy of fitting and in the squareness and equal height of all the blocks. But the builders were altogether wrong in their levels, and tilted the whole chamber over to one corner, so that their courses are 2 1/4 inches higher at the northeast than at the southwest. A difference much greater than that in the whole base of the pyramid. An error like this in putting together such a magnificent piece of work is astonishing, for the walls are composed of nearly 1/10 of a mile length of granite blocks about 4 feet high and probably as thick, all of which are gauged to the same height with an average variation of only 1/20th of an inch, as it would be difficult to suppose any architect allowing such errors of building, after so closely restricting the variations of mason's work. It strongly suggests that the granite had been prepared for the chamber long before it was built, and that the supervision was less strict as the work went on, owing to more hurry and less care, or owing to the death of the man who had really directed the superfine accuracy of the earlier work.
God. Or
I love Petrie.
that some kind of damage took place to the
To
chamber
the entire
itself.
thing, yeah. But shift the entire
Yeah, so that
chamber
one side is sitting
sinks.
down. Yeah.
crazy. Hard to imagine. What push the rocks, all the rocks underneath it down?
Well, no, it's floating, right? So there could be some kind of damage that would allow it to sink on one end. I don't know. But yeah, he's right. That one thing I did notice about that, and you know, the rest of the pyramid does this as well. The blocks are all different shapes and sizes in terms of height. They're the same for each course.
That's right. Yeah.
And they did that in the you know, the king's chamber as well. You go in there and every block is a different shape, but they all fit the course in terms of height.
Yeah. It is crazy though to imagine that whole chamber is tilted 2.5 inches when the base of the pyramid is like
Yeah.
way more accurate.
Has a better accuracy than that.
It's wild.
But to me, the first thing I thought of there was like, well, the chamber's floating inside of the whole structure. And
But I mean,
we
it's-
know there's
What's your definition of floating? I guess I'm not sure. I don't understand what
like
you
in other
mean
words,
by that.
it isn't completely sealed in on all sides by core masonry.
Yeah,
like-
but underneath it.
Yeah, it's sitting on stuff, but there's this idea that it's like an egg, you know, an egg crate sort of thing. So if the whole thing is shaking, because we know there's at least evidence of earthquake damage. It just doesn't seem like you could end up with that kind of tilting without there being evidence in the floor. Like, because it seems like you would get is, you know, places where the blocks and the floor
Yeah,
would separate from
that's
each
what I'm
other rather
thinking
than the
too.
whole thing
Like
tilting
the whole
over.
room all equally settling.
Yeah,
like
the
that
way you
doesn't-
would get that is by settling over long periods of time. Because a house can do that. You know,
or just not building it properly.
yeah, well, you put the foundation in and everything's perfectly flat and you put the house up or whatever, and then over time it starts to tilt in one direction because something's wrong.
Yeah. But that's like usually the ground underneath the slab.
Yeah.
In this case, the ground underneath is solid rock.
Yeah.
And the base of the house, it's like having one room of your house tilt.
Yeah.
And the rest of it not.
Which I lived in a house in Vermont that did that.
Yes.
The entire kitchen was hanging off the house. Right? So the rest of the house is flat, and then you walk into the kitchen and it's downhill from there on.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine that happening in the midst of all that
I know.
stone stacked up.
Yeah.
But all right. I'll take a break.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Snake Bros Institute for Advanced Pyramid Studies with William Matthew Flinders Petrie Johnson V. But Russ had an observation in the break.
Yeah,
about
during the
this.
break, I was just wondering, like, what are the more recent surveys show? I'm not saying that Petrie's wrong, but I do remember, I exhaustively read everything that Rudolf Gantenbrink wrote about his studies of the pyramids, and he did a bunch of surveying in the, I guess would it be the early 90s, late 90s, I don't remember, but he did a bunch of surveying, and he commented on how a lot of the surveying he was doing hadn't been done since Petrie's time, and he found what he thought were a lot of errors or flaws in Petrie's measurements, at least in some of them. I'm not saying that this means Petrie's wrong about the tilt of the chamber. I'm just saying that's an interesting...
It could be, yeah. I mean, the fact that he didn't mention it, or at least that you don't remember it being mentioned, and that he did mention that there were flaws in Petrie's measurements, which undoubtedly there would be. He measured so much stuff.
And the other difference is that Gantenbrink is using far more modern stuff, which doesn't necessarily mean you get accurate measurements compared to the old ways, but, surveys of this structure.
Well, when we go back,
Gantenbrink was extremely surprised.
When we go back, I'll put the laser level on the floor.
Yeah.
And we'll just turn it
I was
on
thinking the
and
same thing. Like, and I would like to know the tilt of the floor versus the tilt of the lines of the blocks.
Yeah.
Is it really the whole room or is it the floor?
Yeah.
Anyway, good stuff.
All right. Well, we'll continue on.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get through this whole section. If not, we'll just continue it in the Patreon, I guess.
Yeah.
172. Beside these signs of carelessness, there are several points in which work that has been intended has never been carried out. The stone was left in the rough where it was liable to damage and was to be finished off after it was safe from injury. Over the north doorway of the gallery, the stone is left roughly in excess, and in the Queen's chamber, the vertical edge of the doorway is left with an excess of an inch or more. We saw that.
Yep, we saw that.
And as a guide, a short bit was drafted to the true surface at the top and bottom of each stone. Didn't notice that. So he's saying each stone, like where they wanted to protect that corner, a little section at the top and bottom of each stone was drafted to the true finished surface as a guide.
Oh.
And then the bulk was left in the middle of that corner going up the
So
doorway.
when you're setting it, you have a guide.
That's right.
And then you clean it off
later
afterwards.
you can clean it off.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, that seems like you're putting the easiest part of the stone to damage.
Well, it may not be the very bottom corner, but at least, well, it just says top and bottom. We will have to inspect that when we go back.
Yeah.
It just says,
well, it seems like
a short bit was drafted to the true surface at the top and bottom of each stone.
Okay, it may not be in the corner then. It could be in the middle.
From these,
those corners are the most vulnerable parts of the stone. Yeah.
From these points, we see that not only was the work hurried about the middle, but that some parts never received the finishing strokes. I think he means the middle of the pyramid, the middle courses. The plan of the passages was certainly altered once, and perhaps oftener, Oftener?
Oftener.
During the course of building. The
Really?
shaft, or well, leading from the north end of the gallery down to the subterranean parts, was either not contemplated at first or else was forgotten in the course of the building. The proof of this is that it has been cut through the masonry after the courses were completed. On examining the shaft, it is found to be irregularly tortuous through the masonry and without any arrangement of the blocks to suit it, while in more than one place, a corner of a block may be seen left in the irregular curved side of the shaft, all the rest of the block having disappeared in cutting the shaft.
Yeah, okay.
We read that from
Okay, so he's making the assumption there that the well shaft was intended to be part of the original structure, and they forgot and had to do it later.
and had to go dig the rest of it out. I don't know. That's just
Yeah, I'm just pointing out what it seems like he's saying.
This is a conclusive point, since it would never have been so built at first. His point is that it was cut later.
Yeah.
A similar feature is at the mouth of the passage in the gallery. Here, the sides of the mouth are very well cut, quite as good work as the dressing of the gallery walls. But on the south side, there is a vertical joint in the gallery side, only 5.3 inches from the mouth. Now, great care is always taken in the pyramid to put large stones at a corner. And it is quite inconceivable that a pyramid builder would put a mere slip, 5.3 inch thick block besides, I guess it's a slip. I don't know.
Yeah, a little tiny.
5.3 inch thick beside the opening to a passage. It evidently shows that the passage mouth was cut out after the building was finished in that part.
Yeah.
It is clear then that the whole of this shaft is an additional feature to the first plan.
Right.
Another evidence of altered plans is in the Queen's chamber floor. This is not merely left in the rough core, but it has actually had another course of the rough core masonry built, or at least fitted, onto it. And this upper course has been removed or omitted in order to build the chamber there. Of the subterranean... I don't understand that. The Queen's chamber floor. This is not merely left in the rough core, but it has actually had another course of the rough core masonry built or at least fitted onto it. And this upper course has been removed or omitted. So what?
Okay, what?
In order to build the chamber there. So it's like they built. Okay, so maybe what he's saying is that they built the course and then they removed the portion of the course to build the Queen's chamber.
Yeah.
Like it came later.
Yeah. They're like, we're putting a chamber here, to
some
make
of
it
that
to make
course
it
away.
higher, to make the room taller. Take
some
that
of that
course
floor
out.
away.
Yeah.
Of the subterranean chamber, all that can be said is that it is wholly unfinished and hardly more than sketched out, so that a change of plan with regard to that also seems proved, since it was the part first begun. 170. My dyslexia really doesn't like that wording. 173. Having now pointed out various mechanical considerations on the history of the building, we will consider the history of the closing of the pyramid. There can be no doubt that the entrance passage was left clear and accessible, the door closing it on the outside against mere chance curiosity, but being readily swung on its pivots when regularly opened. The upper passages, however, were well concealed, though they had probably been surreptitiously entered before the Arabic forcing.
Yeah.
It has often been said...
How?
Yeah. It has often been said that through the well shaft...
Through the well shaft.
It has often been said that the Queen's chamber was intended to contain the blocks for plugging the ascending passage until they were required to be let down. But there is an absolute impossibility in this theory. The blocks are 47.3 by 41.6 inches in section, while the Queen's chamber passage is but 46.2 by 40.6 inches, or too small in both dimensions to allow the granite plug blocks to pass. Hence, the blocks must have stood in the gallery until they were wanted, since they could never be got upwards through the ascending passage, as that is but 38.2 inches at the lower end, and the existing plugs are 41.6 inches wide above that. Neither could the plugs be brought up the well shaft, as that is but 28 inches square. Did I read this portion before?
No.
I can't remember.
No.
Nor out of the King's chamber, as the passage is but 43.6 inches high. Now, though, it is most likely that there never were many plug blocks, yet the existing ones land us in a further conclusion. What?
There never were many plug blocks?
Yeah, that's what he said. Okay, whatever that means. The broken end of the upper block and a chip of granite still remaining cemented to the floor of the passage a little above that show that it was probably 24 inches longer than it is now, judging by marks on the passage. Thus, the total length of plug blocks would be about 203 inches, or very probably 206 inches, or 10 cubits, like so many lengths marked out in that passage. Now, the flat part of the Queen's Chamber passage floor within the gallery, on which blocks might be placed, is but 176 inches long, and over the whole distance from the north wall to the gallery to the vertical cut down. No, he says, okay, so the whole distance from the north wall of the gallery to the vertical cut down is but 1,994 inches, I think. So in no way could 203 inches of blocks stand on the horizontal floor, and certainly any passage through the gallery door would be impossible. He doesn't say the unit of measure. So when I'm saying inches, it's not in there.
Oh, okay.
But he does say it sometimes.
Right.
So that when he's giving these numbers, I just am trying to put it in there because otherwise it reads strangely.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is... So basically what he's saying, because when you enter... When you get above the... when you enter the Grand Gallery, there's like... It's not just this ramp that goes up. There's a cutout of the ramp, right? Like the middle of the ramp is cut down flat, and if you keep walking straight, then you have to duck down and go into the passage to the Queen's Chamber.
Yeah.
Or you can like climb up to the left or right side and go up the
ramp, yeah.
the ramp of the Grand Gallery. So what he's trying to point out is you can't fit the plug blocks into the tunnel that goes to the Queen's Chamber, and the you couldn't lay them on their sides in that cutout space because it's only 190 something inches.
Yeah.
So even if you stood them up, I think he's saying you couldn't get out of the shaft.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I guess his conclusion there is like they had to be basically sitting in the Grand Gallery somewhere waiting to be slid down the ascending passageway. They couldn't have been stashed in the Queen's Chamber or in the passageway to the Queen's Chamber. They had to be in the Grand Gallery itself.
And so he's saying the whole distance of the Grand Gallery from the north wall all the way to where it's cut out, where the floor is cut out, is 1,994 inches. Right? And so he's saying there's no way that 203 inches of blocks could stand on the horizontal floor because that's only 176 inches long.
Yeah.
And certainly any passage through the gallery door would be impossible, even if you could get some there. So basically he's saying, to say nothing of the difficulty of pushing such blocks along a rough floor so as to tip them down the passage, that's the next thing you would have to do.
Right.
Thus, the plug blocks cannot have stood in any place except on the sloping floor of the gallery, which is incredibly steep.
Yeah.
That's just nuts. For them, then, to be slid down the passage, it was necessary that the opening to the Queen's Chamber should be completely covered with a continuous floor. The traces of this floor may still be seen in the holes for beams of stone across the passage, and in fragments of stone and cement still sticking on the floor of the Queen's Chamber passage at that point. So we need to look at this too.
I remember
those sockets.
Yeah, the sockets on the sides when you're entering the Queen's Chamber.
He's like, those were stone beam. Those were sockets for stone beams that went across
to
hold the floor
the
that the granite
so that
blocks
could
could slide down.
Okay.
That's freaking crazy. But we are met then by an extraordinary idea, says William Matthew Flinders Petrie, that all access to the King's Chamber after its completion must have been by climbing over the plug blocks as they lay in the gallery, or by walking up the ramps on either side of them. Yet as the blocks cannot physically have been lying in any other place before they were let down, we are shut up to this view. That's just incredible. The coffer cannot have been put into the pyramid after the king's chamber was finished, as it is nearly an inch wider than the beginning of the ascending passage. The only conclusion, then, is that the coffer was placed in the king's chamber before the roof was put on. That if Khufu was finally buried in it, and not in some more secret place, the inner coffin and any procession accompanying it must have gone up the gallery on the narrow side ramps or benches past the plug blocks 4 feet high standing between them. That before or after this, the queen's chamber was blocked up. Then the plug blocks were slid down on the ascending passage, and finally the workmen retired by the well shaft down to the entrance passage, closing the way by a plug of stone not cemented in place and probably removable at will. Finally, see section 58 about that. But you see what he's saying? So they have a block that they close the well shaft with.
Yeah.
Easily removable.
I think it's funnier to imagine, like, it's the whole, you have the honor guard thing, right? Like, you guys' job is to close the tomb from the inside.
And then you just put yourself in a box?
Yeah.
Like you close the box.
And they dig the well shaft to get out.
Oh, instead of doing that? Yeah. just make the entrance out of the Grand Gallery nice looking. And then,
Yeah.
And then let's just torture it
Yeah.
through the masonry.
Well, they get more and more in a hurry as they're running out of food and water.
Yeah. They couldn't have put the rubble anywhere.
That's true. Yeah.
Finally, the lower mouth of the well shaft was closed. Okay, so he's saying that there was an upper plug block in the well shaft. Right? So the plug blocks were slid down the ascending passage, and finally the workmen retired by the well shaft down to the entrance passage, closing the way by a plug of stone not cemented in place and probably removable at will. Finally, the lower mouth of the well shaft was closed, probably by a plugging block not cemented in. And then visitors of later times crawling in under the outer flap door of the casing, the stone that could be, quote unquote, lifted out, and so went down to the empty and unfinished subterranean chamber in the rock. So he's talking about, they would go on the outer flap door of the casing, they'd open that and go in and just find the subterranean chamber unfinished.
Yeah.
It may be an open question whether the queen's chamber was not the sepulchre of Knumu Khufu, the co-regent of Khufu. Edrizi, in his, I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, or whoever it is, in his accurate and observant account of the pyramid in 1236 AD, mentions an empty vessel in the queen's chamber, and that this was not a confused notion of the coffer now known, is provided by his saying that in the king's chamber, an empty vessel is seen here similar to the former. Whether any fragments of a coffer remained there among the great quantity of stone excavated from the floor and niche, it is almost hopeless to inquire, since that rubbish is now all shot away into various holes and spaces. So that excavation into the niche was there in Petrie's time.
Yeah.
And there's just rubble all shoved into everywhere.
And that report was from
1236 AD.
Wow.
But he's saying, that there was a box in the queen's chamber.
Similar to the one that was in the king's chamber.
Yeah.
But it's now totally gone.
Yep.
Or fragmented and shoved in various pockets.
Yeah. Caviglia, however, did not find a coffer when clearing the chamber, but fragments might have been easily overlooked. And I don't remember when Caviglia did that stuff. Okay, 175. When, then, was the pyramid first violated? Probably by the same hands that so ruthlessly destroyed the statues and temples of Khafra and the pyramids of Abu Roash, Abu Sir, and Saqqara. That is to say, probably during the civil wars of the 17th to the 10th dynasties. At that time, the secret opening of the pyramid, by which the workmen retired, would still be known. And while that was the case, and before any forced openings had been made, the coffer was lifted up to see if any hidden passages existed beneath it. Then probably was its lid broken off, and the body of the granite builder treated to the spite of his enemies. Then also may the queen's chamber, the serdab of the pyramid, have been forced open, and the diorite statue torn from its grand niche, broken up, pedestal and all, and carried out to be smashed to chips and scattered on the hill opposite the pyramid door, so that no one should ever restore it. This is more of a guess than an inference, and yet a guess so far harmonious with what we know of other monuments that it perhaps deserves to be used as a working hypothesis.
So he's saying that in
civil wars, people knew, like, when you're not having a civil war, people know about the entrance, but they're not going to violate it because the king's still there, and you just get killed probably.
Yeah.
But then in the middle of a civil war, it's like, okay, let's go in and smash that guy up and desecrate
loot whatever's there and desecrate everything else.
Yeah.
And so he's saying that in the niche in the Queen's Chamber was possibly a statue of Khufu, like the coffre and throne that we know about that was found buried upside down.
Probably.
Which is a disgraceful way to bury a statue, right? That's...
Yeah.
So he's saying, well, maybe they found this statue of Khufu in the Queen's Chamber, which is interesting, and then they shattered it and took it outside and scattered the pieces.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay. I'm getting it.
All right. In classical times, we know from Strabo that the subterranean parts were readily accessible, though the supposed proof adduced by Caviglia from... Wait, did I skip something? No. And this is a strange quote, IAMER, and then in parentheses he says ME joined. Oh, okay, ME joined. So it's IAME, which are joined together, and R, which he found smoked on the roof of the subterranean chamber, has nothing to do with the question. If he had noted the graffiti around the entrance of the pyramid, he would have found Wait a minute. I feel like this is wrong. Something's wrong here. Well, anyway.
Can you summarize it? He's saying that there's graffiti on the inside.
Yeah, he's
and graffiti on the outside.
He's basically saying that he would have noted the graffiti around the entrance of the pyramid. He would have found I.A. Mercator, 1563. Which completely explains the smoked letters.
Mercator.
I'm just wondering why he jumped to that.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I'm just
That's
wondering.
the map maker.
Yes.
You're trying to figure out.
Okay, I see what he's saying. All right, so in classical times, we know from Strabo that the subterranean parts were readily accessible, though the supposed proof adduced by Caviglia from the, quote, AMER, blah, 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 which he found smoked on the roof of the subterranean chamber, has nothing to do with the question.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I was like, because I know what's coming next, I was like, why is this here? Because I actually had two versions of this PDF, and one of them was messed up.
Okay.
176. With regard to the many records of inscriptions on the outside of the pyramid, a few words are necessary. From the time of Herodotus down to the 15th century, inscriptions are continually mentioned, and their great abundance is described with astonishment by travelers. This has led to the supposition that the builders had left records inscribed on the outside, although not a letter is to be found on the inside. But against the possibility of this view, it must be remembered that no early inscriptions are found on the casing remaining at the Great Pyramid. We pointed this out.
Yeah.
Nor on any of the innumerable fragments of those stones, nor on the remaining casing of the second pyramid, nor on that of the third pyramid, nor on the casing of the south pyramid of Dashur, nor on the casing of the pyramid of Maidum, nor on the occasional blocks uncovered at the Saqqara pyramids. In fact, not a single example of hieroglyphs has ever been seen on any casing, nor on any fragment of casing.
So that's not completely true, because we saw very faint and rough hieroglyphs in the granite casing stones on the Menkaure pyramid near the entrance.
He starts then, so he goes through example after example after example of the inscriptions that are on these pyramids that are not,
contemporary.
Yeah, they're graffiti.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I think so he's saying
All
legitimate.
Right, okay. Like, in other words, the hieroglyphs don't match the style of hieroglyph writing from the time period that he thinks the pyramids were built in. They're all later than that.
Yeah. It says the truth then about these numberless inscriptions appears to be that they were all travelers' graffiti.
Yeah.
Strabo says that the characters were like Old Greek, but were not readable. This points to Phoenician or Cypriot graffiti. The accounts of the inscriptions given by the Arabs also shows that they were mere graffiti. Abu Masher Jafar, before 886 AD, mentions Mosanad, i.e. Himyaritic letters. And so then he goes on and on of all these people mentioning different letters, Latin, Hebrew. So like everybody's been signing their name on this thing for thousands of years.
And it's all versions of like
Basically.
Johnson was here.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, Phoenician. I don't know how to say this. Syracuse? I don't know. Whether these travelers all understood exactly what they were talking about may be doubted, but at least none of them describe hieroglyphs, such as they must have been familiar with, on all the tombs and other monuments, and they agree in the great diversity of the languages inscribed. The earlier travelers also do not describe such a great number of inscriptions as do the Arabic writers, suggesting that the greater part recorded in later times were due to Roman and Coptic graffiti. So he's talking about, it's kind of confusing, but
No, it's not confusing. I think it makes
he was
sense.
listing a bunch of writers who were who were recording that they were seeing written inscriptions, and
Yeah, and then he's saying that the later peoples describe more inscriptions than the earlier
Right.
peoples, implying that all of it is
More
graffiti.
graffiti.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, among the hundreds of pieces of casing stones that I have looked over,
But can we stop for a second?
Sure.
I want to go back to the very important point that he made that, like, despite all of these various descriptions across the ages of people describing writing on the outsides of the pyramids, that there is nevertheless none inside.
that's right.
Which, I don't know. It's like, what does that mean? Like, how
It's
come
too dark? It's too dark to write in there.
too dark? It just seems like, I mean, obviously you could say, well, the vast majority of people who went by the pyramids didn't go in them, right? Why not?
Well,
And then the ones that did go in them, at least in the Great Pyramid, didn't write their names in there. Why not?
some of them wrote their names in smoke, and that smoke is gone.
Yeah.
Soot. They didn't carve their names into the walls. Right?
But we did see that in other places. Right? It's just interesting that it implies that something was keeping these people out of the pyramid in general. Or
Yeah.
if they went in there, they were too afraid to carve their name. Or maybe it was hard to breathe in there and you couldn't stay very long. Or you had a smoky torch and it sucked. I don't know. How long does it take to carve your name into
Can you
limestone?
imagine climbing down that shaft with the torch? Where you put it? You can't put it in front of you. It's going to be right in your face. The smoke's just coming straight up in
And
your
there's
face.
and, you're right, and there's no helping.
So you put it behind you, and then you're just shining. Your just shadow is like
Right. And when we were climbing around in there are little, it's not really stairs, but there are places where you can put your feet that give you friction that keep you from sliding
Yeah,
further
yeah.
down.
God.
Whereas if it was just like a sandy, okay, the other thing I know, like, so I wondered about this with the subterranean chamber. You know, you get down there and you're like, wow, you don't know how much cleaning has been done, but you're like, well, no one's come down here and rough carved their name into this rough carving stuff. But on the other hand, for most of the time, it was probably buried, right? The shaft
Yeah,
was
there
full
was-
of rubble.
But why was it full of rubble?
Yeah.
We've been going back and forth over
Having
that.
it be full of rubble implies people inside the pyramid cutting
That's
stuff.
what I'm saying. I can't imagine that what's the guy, the Arab guy? Mahmud. If he found the pyramid pristine and not full of rubble, then he would have found the well shaft.
Yeah.
Like that, surely they would have inspected every hole
Yeah.
in every part of the shaft and every crack and break.
Petrie's claiming that they sealed off the top of the well shaft. Maybe it wasn't like mortared
A
in,
loose
but
fitted block just,
right.
like-
Maybe they missed it. I don't know.
I just can't imagine.
I can't imagine that either.
They're blasting their way through there looking for stuff, and then they find the ascending passage and tunnel all the way around it. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I can't go with that theory anymore. Like, the way I see it, they already knew
I
what
love
was
the
up
idea
there.
that they got in there and they were like, all right, Mahmoud's fat ass needs to get in here, so we're going to cut our way out with a bigger, fatter tunnel so
He
that
wants
he can
to
make
get
it
in.
through. Yeah.
For sure he wanted to get in, because if they can come out of there and say, there's nothing in there, man.
Yeah.
That was what I'm thinking. Like,
Yeah.
They come out and they're like, there's no treasure. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
He's got to go see it himself, because
Yeah.
of course they can come out of that little shaft
And
and
then,
say
of
there's
course,
nothing.
you have to wonder what kind of treasure was he thinking about? Not like he needed treasure.
Yeah, he was looking for the lamp.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the guy who ran the entire, Ottoman world or whatever I don't know if it was Ottomans at the time. He didn't need treasure. Not that he wouldn't want more, but I'm just saying, like, he had no lack of gold and jewels. So what was he really looking
like
for?
treasure, like ancient knowledge or
That's
ancient tech.
what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm trying to say that it isn't gold and jewels we're talking about here. And so the reason he needed to get in there maybe is because the workmen that he sent
That's what it
to
was.
do the digging are not the ones that can even tell what the treasure is.
That's what it was. They got the shamir,
Yeah.
and they didn't know how to use it, and they cut that tunnel.
They're like, whoops, whoa,
They cut Mahmoud's tunnel.
turn that thing
Just
off.
Crazy. It's going nuts. Okay, let's get through this.
Okay.
Now, among the hundreds of pieces of casing stones that I, William Matthew Flinders Petrie, have looked over, very few traces of inscription were to be seen. This was, however, to be expected, considering that the pieces nearly all belonged to the upper casing stones, out of reach of mere travelers. 3 examples of single letters were found, 2 Greek and 1 unknown. And on the west side, in one of the excavations, a piece was discovered bearing 3 graffiti, one large, one attracting lesser scribblers, as in modern times. The earliest inscription was probably of Ptolemy X, showing
Lesser scribblers.
showing portions of the letters, and then he goes on to describe some various pieces that he's found.
That's what you like, when you're trying to become an artist, you start out as a lesser scribbler.
Yeah.
You're like level 1.
Right. I would hate to have Petrie look at anything that I've ever built. God, this guy just like tear it apart, dude.
Yeah.
When one considers the large number of graffiti which are to be seen on every ancient building of importance, it seems almost impossible but that the Great Pyramid, one of the most renowned and visited of all, should not have been similarly covered with ancient scribbles, like the host of modern names which have been put upon it since the casing was removed. The statues of Ramesses II at Abu Simbel bear quantities of Greek graffiti. In fact, some of the earliest Greek inscriptions known, besides Phoenician and Roman. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaking cool. The earliest known writings were scribblings on other people's ancient objects.
Scribblers.
The top of this.
I don't know why this is so funny.
I don't know.
It is.
The top of the Temple of Khonsu.
I wonder what he would say about modern, like, badass graffiti art,
Oh, yeah.
It's just like a train passing by, just like
scribblers.
nonstop scribbles.
The top of the Temple of Khonsu at Karnak is crowded with the outlines of visitors' feet, with their names and particulars appended. In hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Greek, the inscriptions on the colossi of Amenhotep III, the Memnons, at Thebes, and on the Sphinx at Giza are well known. The long scribbles in Demotic on the temple walls at Thebes have lately been examined. The corridors of Abydos bear early Greek graffiti. The passage of the South Pyramid of Dashur has 2 hieroglyphic graffiti besides Greek, and there is scarcely any monument of importance in Egypt but what shows the scribbling propensities of mankind, be they Egyptians, Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, or the worst sinners of modern times, Hellenists and Americans. Hellenes.
Hellenes. Yeah. Hopefully the audience finds this as funny as we do.
Okay.
Freaking scribblers.
Should I keep going or should we just...
This is great. I mean,
We're
is
already-
it getting to a point?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 pages left.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay. The history of the destruction of the pyramids really begins with the Arabs. They first, under Caliph Mamun, forced the great hole through the masonry from the outside to the part commonly called Mamun's Hole, at the beginning of the ascending passage. Had it not been for their shaking of the masonry, which let fall the stone that concealed the plug blocks, perhaps the upper chambers would have remained yet unknown. How does this story last for so damn long? This is what it's like. Hearing the stone drop, they turned aside their southward progress and burrowed some 20 feet eastwards. They broke into the entrance passage and found the fallen stone.
It's a really cool story.
Yeah.
The sound of that,
I guess it's here. I guess that's what it is.
yeah.
It's not cool to me. It makes me mad.
I know, but it's a cool story,
I wish there was...
even if it's not true.
Yeah. Here they saw that it had covered the beginning of another passage, and so they forced out of their hole a continuation southward and upward to get behind the granite plug. Finding they only hit the side of the plug blocks, they tracked along them in the softer limestone until they reached the upper end, and then they rushed freely up the hitherto unused passage. Probably they found the plug at the top of the well not replaced after the earlier destroyers, and so got down the well and forced out its lower closing, which must have been in position for the Greeks and Romans not to have been aware of the passage. Such, from the statements of historians and the details of the place, seems to have been the history of the attack on the interior of the Great Pyramid. So yeah, the fact that the Greeks and Romans
We're unaware of the well shaft.
yeah, it must have been pretty well sealed
implies,
up.
number one, wait, how does that work? He's saying that Mamun's plunderers replaced the well shaft block in the Grand Gallery? Because the Greeks and Romans came way after them, right? I mean, those guys were doing that in like 800 AD or something, or do I have my dates way off here?
I think he's saying the first... Well, from what I thought, he was saying that the Greeks and Romans had come before and never found it. But I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's saying probably they found the plug at the top of the well not replaced after the earlier destroyers, and so got down the well and forced out its lower closing, which must have been in position for the Greeks and Romans not to have been aware of the passage.
I just have my dates way off. It's right. Greeks and Romans before the Arabs.
After the time of Mamun, the exterior was used as a quarry. The casing was apparently stripped off by Sultan Hassan for his mosque in 1356. And I don't know I think these stories may have since changed, but since he is said to have brought the stone hence, and William of Baldensel in 1336 mentions both the large pyramids as being de maximis lapidibus et politis. It was also Hassan, or near successor of his, who stripped the second pyramid, as I found a coin of his deep down in the southeast foundation, which proves he was the one who completely stripped it. But I mean, yeah, he was excavating through the rubble of the stripped materials. So he finds a coin of...
Yeah.
So the top was not much denuded in the 17th century. Lambert, Troy Relations d'Egypte, I guess that's the name of a book, in 1630 mentions 12 stones as forming the top of the core and says that the platform was 20 spans wide. By his span measures of the coffer, this would be 230 inches. Among these 12 stones was unique, and then a bunch of a different language. Greaves in 1638 found 9 stones and reports 2 as missing. Thevenot in 1667 reports 12 stones, but as he understood Arabic well, he probably accepted a statement of what had been there 30 years before. Other stones of the top and edges of the core were thrown down at intervals until the beginning of the present century, as is evident from the weathering marks and the dates of the graffiti. 178, and I think this is maybe the last.
So he's talking about the development of what we know now is the platform at the top of the Great Pyramid and what it looks like.
Yeah.
You basically got 9 stones, and there's a couple of missing that would have made 12 if they were all there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having now sketched out its history, it is desirable not to close this account of the Great Pyramid without summing up those theories of its design which seem most likely, and which are considered one with the other. In the following sketch, then, no theory will be mentioned which is not well within the facts of the case, and no dimensions will be required to do double duty for 2 theories which do not coincide. It is possible that some parts may have been made intentionally varying in size in order to include 2 different relations to other parts, but such is scarcely provable. And in a general statement like the following, it is better to omit some things that may be true than it is to include a number of dubious theories which are not supported by a system of coincidences in different parts of the structure. And if some judge that this summary includes too much, and others think that it states too little, it must be remembered that the whole of the materials for forming an opinion are impartially provided in the previous chapters of this work. For the whole form, the pi proportion, the height is the radius of a circle, which equals the circumference of the pyramid, has been very generally accepted of late years, and is a relation strongly confirmed by the presence of the numbers 7 and 22 in the number of cubits in height and base respectively, 7 divided by 22 being one of the best known approximations of pi. With these numbers, or some slight fractional correction on the 22, the designer adopted 7 of a length of 20 double cubits for the height, and 22 of this length for the half circuit. The profile used for the work being thus 14 rise on 11 base. The form and size being thus fixed, the floor of the main chamber of the building, the king's chamber, was placed at the level where the vertical section of the pyramid was halved, where the area of the horizontal section was half of that of the base, where the diagonal from corner to corner was equal to the length of the base, and where the width of the face was equal to half the diagonal of the base.
Wow.
That's crazy, dude. The queen's chamber was placed at half this height above the base, and exactly in the middle of the pyramid from north to south. Beside the level of the king's chamber, signalizing where the area was a simple fraction of 1/2 the base area, thicker courses were perhaps intentionally introduced where the area of the course was a multiple of 1/20th the base area. This system accounts for nearly all the curious examples of a thick course being suddenly brought in, with a series above it gradually diminishing until another thick course occurs.
Wow.
So they're basing it on the area of the entire course.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They're cool. I mean, it's not crazy. It's just cool. Like the mind of the builder there. Like, I wonder what they're, the engineers are like, when you get, it's like, I don't know. It's just a really cool way to do it. It's just not.
And they're placing he's saying the floor of the king's chamber occurs where a whole bunch of those things happen in the same place.
That's right. Yeah. That's awesome.
That's really cool.
The angle of the slope of the entrance passage is 1 rise on 2 base, and the other passages are near the same angle, probably modified in order to bring the chambers to the required levels. The length of the entrance passage, the ascending passage, the antechamber passages, and perhaps the queen's chamber passage are all in round numbers of cubits, while the gallery length, horizontal, is equal to the vertical height of its end above the base, which is determined by the king's chamber being at the level of half the pyramid area. The height and width of the passages, gallery, and ramps are all determined by the form of the end of the king's chamber, of which the passages are 1/5, the gallery 2/5, and the ramps 1/10 the size in each direction. The king's chamber walls are determined by the same pi proportion which rules the exterior of the pyramid, the circuit of the side of the chamber being equal to a circle described by its width as a radius. And further, the length of the side of the chamber is equal to the diameter of its circuit. Thus, the circuit of the side has its radius at right angles across the chamber, and its diameter the length of the side along the chamber. But the floor of the chamber is raised above the base of the walls, a peculiar arrangement for which some reason must have existed. It gives, in fact, two heights. The wall height we have just seen is required for the pi proportion. The actual height from the floor agrees to another system, which is found to run throughout all the chambers.
So wait, is he saying that if you measure all the way around the, like they say, the floor corner of the king's chamber, you just started in one corner and went all the way around till you got back to that corner, and
That's
then you
the
made that
circle.
into a circle. Then you get the radius of that circle and stand it up. That's how tall the chamber is.
I thought
or
it
is
was the width of the
or
room.
is it the width of one of the narrow side?
I think it's the width of the narrow side
Okay.
is what he said. I could go back.
It's all right. And then the diagonal is the diameter of the circle.
The point is, with this kind of stuff, I wish I had read it recently, because I had like reread it and tried to ponder and visualize it and all that
Okay.
kind of stuff back then, but it's hard for me to do. And yeah, I'm pretty sure he was saying it was the width. Let's see.
The narrow width of the chamber. That's what I thought he was saying, but I was just checking.
So he says, the circuit of the side of the chamber being equal to a circle. So, yeah, described by its width as a radius.
Okay.
The circuit of the side
Yeah.
of the chamber.
So if you measure all the way around all the sides and get the length, the full length, and then you roll that around into a circle, that's what he's saying. He's phrasing it weirdly. So the same thing as if you measure all sides of the pyramid at the base and then assume them to be a circle, you get a diameter, and then you can get a radius. He's just saying they use the same process here.
The length of the side of the chamber is equal to the diameter of its circuit.
Okay.
Thus, the circuit of the side has its radius at right angles across the chamber, and its diameter the length of the side along the chamber. So yeah, it's just, he says it like three different ways. It's weird. Okay, so going back to there's two ways to measure this. So if you're only looking at the actual wall height, that's how you get the pi proportion. The actual height from the floor agrees to another system, which is found to run throughout all the chambers. After the attention shown to square measure in the various levels of the pyramid, it is not surprising to find something of the same kind in the chambers. Though the idea of making the squares of the lineal dimensions of a chamber to be integral areas may seem peculiar, yet the beauty of thus making all the diagonals of a chamber to be on one uniform system with its direct dimensions would be perhaps a sufficient inducement to lead the builders to its adoption. Thank you. Practically, because I think this is the diagram that I saw in Revelation of the Pyramids,
Yeah.
right? They show you the area of like the side wall of the chamber, and then they compare that somehow to the diagonal, the length of the diagonal.
He's saying that they were using a coherent system across all these various structures and shapes and sizes, including the entire thing down to stuff that's happening in the chambers and one wall, to match area measurements of various things to diagonal and straight line measurements of various things. Yeah.
So cool. That's just cool.
Yeah. It's I'm just imagining
some
like
kind
the
of
guy
harmony in there, you know?
guy who's drawing it, the architect who's sitting there drawing it is just laughing to himself. He's just like, "Oh yeah, here we go. I'll make that match this, and nobody will ever figure this out."
Practically, it is only consistent and uniform. It's the only consistent and uniform theory which is applicable to all the chambers and the coffer, and even to the second pyramid chamber. By this theory, then, the squares of the dimensions of the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, the antechamber, and the subterranean chamber are all even numbers of square cubits and nearly all multiples of 10. From this, it necessarily follows that the squares of all the diagonals of all the sides of these chambers and their cubic diagonals are likewise multiples of 10 square cubits. And the king's and queen's chambers are so arranged that the cubic diagonals are in even hundreds of square cubits or multiples of 10 cubits squared. For the coffer, it is hard to say what theory is most likely. Its irregularities of form and faults of cutting are such that many theories are included in its variations, and certainly no theory of very great complexity or refinement can be expected. Taking most of its dimensions at their maximum, they agree closely to the same theory as that which is applicable to the chambers. For when squared, they are all even multiples of a square fifth of a cubit. That the cubit was divided decimally in the 4th dynasty we know. And as this theory is also the only one applicable to all the chambers, there is very strong ground for adopting it here. There is no other theory applicable to every lineal dimension to the coffer, but having found the pi proportion in the form of the pyramid and in the king's chamber, there is some ground for supposing that it was intended also in the coffer, on just 1/5 the scale of the chamber. The difference between the requirements of this theory and that of the squares is only 1 to 1,500, or 1 to 1,500. Consistently also with the above theories, the outer length at an extreme maximum may have been 1/100th of the length of the pyramid base. And as the inner length of the second pyramid, the coffer has the same relation to its pyramid. This is rendered the more likely. Finally, it is not impossible that some rough relation of the cubic bulk... I want to stop there. Why would you do that with a coffer meant for a guy? Why would you make it a specific proportion to the entire building if it wasn't some kind of machine?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. Finally, it is not impossible that some rough relation of the cubic bulk and contents may have been aimed at, along with the foregoing designs, and the lineal dimensions required above being nearly all maximum dimensions of the actual coffer, renders it more likely that some other object was in view. In any case, the cubic relations were not very exactly attained, and it would have been impossible to run them closer by merely sawing the granite, somewhat askew, somewhat curved, and somewhat too deeply, without any adjustment afterwards by polishing. The design of a coffer, which should include more than one idea, would not be unlikely in the Great Pyramid, that structure being so remarkable for the care and precision shown in the arrangement of its chambers, and particularly for the accuracy of the chamber in which the coffer is enshrined.
I mean, it almost sounds like you start with the coffer.
Yes.
Which is kind of matches what we were seeing elsewhere in Egypt. Is like, it seems like a lot of these structures, including temples and stuff, were centered around a granite box in the middle of them somewhere.
Right.
And, you know, everything springs outwards from that. So, like, somebody has this coffer, and they're like, measure its dimensions, and then we're going to build a structure that's harmonious with it in multiple ways to put it in, you know?
Yep. So the last thing is a short little conclusion here. He says, such is the outline of what may be considered the tolerably safe theories of the origination of the Great Pyramid. Others may be some further discovery be shown to have been intended. Others may, by some further discovery, be shown to have been intended, but most of these will probably bear the test of time, and certainly bear the test of exact measurement.
All right.
So there's just so much.
It's interesting,
So much good
through
stuff.
all that stuff, and he doesn't mention anything about the shafts. I guess he just wasn't.
There's whole sections on.
Oh, okay.
I'm picking things out in
Yeah.
the building of the. Yeah, he doesn't mention the shafts in the overall purpose of design or whatever,
Yeah.
which is a good point. But at his time, all they had was, you know, shoving a
Yeah.
hook handle rod up in there or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. I like.
There's a lot of good little details in those things. I love the analysis of the granite plugs.
Yeah.
Just the fact that they had to be sitting on that slope,
Yeah.
and you had if they were going to do the funeral procession in there, they had to carry the body over that or around those giant granite plugs laying in there.
Yeah. It doesn't seem very efficient.
Yeah. So I'm not buying it. I'm not buying the whole.
But you like the description of the of the construction overall. Like
That's-
here's a better way to look at it, rather than they had to put down a block every 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So we had this long discussion about that, and like, really, you can get that's misleading.
Yeah, it's accurate, but misleading.
Yeah, because you're averaging it out.
Yeah.
If you have, it's easier to understand when you say, well, 8 guys had to move 10 blocks in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can get past, but
And
I
they
feel
didn't even have to position them. They just had to get them to the site. And then you have a different set of guys that is like their job is to shape them in 9 months.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have another group of guys along with the masons lifting them up the pyramid in a different period of time or whatever. You know, it's like, okay, that when you have
you got divisions of labor.
Divisions of labor and shifting workforces, you have a giant group of people coming on for 3 months. Then you have a group doing this, and you have another group at the quarry. They're doing things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
So
Yeah, one example you gave in our off-air conversation about this was you're like, look, when you're building a house, you got a giant truck that shows up and delivers all the lumber at once. You know, and then you spend or the work crews spend the next month, or probably less, putting all that lumber up into a framework. Right?
Yep.
And so you're like, well, they had to deliver one piece of lumber every 2 minutes. No, they delivered it all at the same time.
That's right. Yeah, and it is hard to imagine, but I mean, like you were saying, bottlenecks, right? With them.
Yeah, because they're supposed to be doing this when the Nile is flooding, and so they're
sailing.
yeah, and the river's like hauling ass and full of mud and shit. You know, it's like flooding, and so you've got 12,000 work crews, or let's just cut that in half, because let's say you put half of your dudes, your farmer dudes.
Yeah, because they're not all going to be on the river at the same
Right.
time.
You put half your farmer dudes to the work of lifting the previously prepared blocks up onto the pyramid, while the other half are moving blocks from one side of the river to the other during the flood period. Well, you still have, 6,000 crews.
Yeah. Thousands of boats.
Yeah.
Thousands of rafts on the river. you
Right.
know.
And all
How
of them,
many blocks were dropped?
and the
how
river is
many
trying
sank?
to push all the blocks, all the rafts downriver, right? Because it's flooding.
It doesn't make it hard to imagine how they achieved this, but to me, it's a much better way to try to look at how it was constructed, because we know that all those blocks were cut and they were all moved there and they were all raised up.
Yeah.
I don't care what methods they use.
Right. It just seems like
Somehow
for
you
certain
got to get 'em there.
bottlenecks. I'm like, you needed to put a bunch of blocks on one boat
And this is why
rather than have one boat per block.
this is why people say that it should have taken longer than 20 years to build.
Yeah.
Which I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't have an issue with it possibly taking longer than 20 years to build.
Yeah.
It's just, we're talking about bottlenecks. Well, what?
The bottleneck is the time crunch, period.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have a bottleneck if you can make it take 200 years.
Yeah. So you can imagine that people could do this in a with that type of system. The fact that they have like their entire population basically out of work for
Yeah.
3 months. You can imagine that, like, forget the pyramid, the temples and all of
Yeah.
the stuff that they've built, right? That just like, 3 months out of the year, you got this massive labor
It's
force.
much more believable for the temples, none of which were anywhere near the scale of any of the pyramids.
I'm just saying that because there's this idea. Well, they had slaves and all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff, right? Well, you don't need they wouldn't need that,
Yeah.
because they would have people that are like, yeah, I'll go work that job in those 3 months.
Right. Yeah. I agree with that. I love the picture of it.
Yeah, me too.
I still have questions about certain things like the bottlenecks. Like, do we have to really, like, okay, we're constraining it to 20 years because of this whole, Khufu's reign sort of thing. I don't know. I also find it interesting that the whole thing seems to be built around, that the entire thing seems to be like a, some people say, well, the whole thing is like a map, or it's a model of the northern hemisphere of the planet. Well, it also seems to be, that's one way of like saying, well, here's this really big thing that they were modeling at 143,200 scale. Well, what Petrie was describing there was what they also did in terms of dimensions, not necessarily shape, which is what they did with the Earth too, is build a really large version of the coffer.
Yeah.
You know, you basically have this box and the whole thing is centered around the measurements that start out with that box.
Yeah. And the chamber is also a stone box, right? I mean, like, it's a granite box.
So you start out with this box, the coffer, and then you're like, let's build a large version of that to put the coffer in. And then we're going to build this massive structure around it, all of which dimensions and placements and angles and everything all stem from basically what's represented in the coffer itself. Now, did that actually happen? I don't know. I'm just saying.
That's what he was saying, is that they seem to have had, they've been working from multiple angles, and they were kind of getting close to many things, but they're sort of bridging between them. Like there's the socle versus the actual, the visible perimeter once the paving stones are in place.
Yeah.
That has a different,
a
different ratio than, and those things, there's like, the idea that it's the difference between the actual pi relationship to the Earth, and that the Earth is squashed from, a little bit because it's bulging at the equator. Well, they were kind of between pi and that bulge.
Yeah. And another big part of what he's saying in there, he's going almost full standard model, except for jeweled cutting tools, mechanically assisted jeweled cutting tools, and the use of iron.
Right.
Those two things are huge steps away from the standard model. So you can, once you give them iron and mechanically assisted jeweled cutting tools, even if they're not bronze, like he was saying, bronze is not, as far as I know, something that they were supposed to have either.
Yeah.
That's a mix of tin and copper, right? It's a metallurgy thing. So he's saying, well, let's give them bronze, which is a much stronger metal than copper. It's still not extremely strong, but it's way better than copper. And then let's also give them iron. Well, if they have iron, why don't they use iron cutting tools with jeweled tips?
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
Maybe bronze is easier to shape. I don't know. I'm not a metallurgist. I'm just saying, like, he's taking it as given in his thing, which I think is great. He's like, look, they had iron. We've got a plate. The plate is obviously, at least, it's very ancient. It's not like a new thing. It's got an imprint of a fossil in it from a fossil that was on the stone it was sitting next to for thousands of years, right? So it's not new. So let's say that the pyramid builders had iron. I can understand if they were just using iron, not steel.
I just have this knee-jerk reaction.
Most of it's gone.
Whenever I hear Vice, whenever I hear his name, I'm just like, whatever he found,
Yeah.
But it's all.
I love the idea of like, okay, so they had iron, so they had iron crowbars, and they had iron plates to protect the stones from their iron crowbars. But on the other hand, they must have had, I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
I know.
And it's like, okay, they're all gone. Yeah, would iron stuff rust completely away in thousands of years? Yeah, it would be gone.
Yeah.
But
you might find some little bits and pieces.
I know,
of
and
it
that's the thing, is
in,
like, there's the same question with this about the copper tools. Like, if we're going to say they used only copper, well, the amount of copper tools that have been found is so minuscule that that we're not finding anywhere near what must have been necessary to build one of these structures, including any of the temples.
Yeah.
So no matter what metal tools they used, it's clear that something happens to them, whether it's people take them off and use them for other stuff and they just disappear into history. I mean, let's say that Khufu's like, all right, I want a giant triangle, so we need 50,000 chisels.
Yeah.
Now you say, well, those 50,000 chisels belong to the throne, so the workmen are allowed to come. Like, you go to work, the work has tons of tools in its shop. They're not yours. You're not supposed to take them with you. I don't know. On the other hand, you can look at
But when you start looking at it that way, you're like, well, where are the mines?
right.
Where where were they getting all this stuff?
They would have to trade for it if it was,
And the jewels.
Yeah.
Like he points out, and we read this on a previous show going through this book where he's like, well, diamond is basically unheard of in the area at the time. So he's like, well, we're just going to assume they used this other one. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
Some other hard jewel. Because there is precedent for that jewel being there around that time. So he's like, yeah.
I do think trade networks could handle some of this, but it just depends.
Well, he's just saying like what's been found.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
They have found
Where
these.
are all the diamonds?
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, stones would be worn out, and then there would be, the tools would be retooled and refitted, and all this stuff. It's like, man, you would have had to have had a massive trade or a massive
trade network. Yeah.
not just trade network, but a manufacturing of these things. And so
Who
now we
was-
go with the
who's
guys
cutting all the
email,
diamonds?
the guy's email with the stone vases. Where are the where's
the manufacturing center for all these apprentices
these-
working on their stone vases?
copper tools?
Yeah. Where are all their tools? Yeah, I agree.
Not just the stone vases, but I mean, just for the tools to do the work.
Yeah, exactly.
If you got 100,000 men, they're not. If they don't have tools, like you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
They all have to have crowbars.
Yeah.
They got to have at least 100,000 plates because
Yep.
you're going to need to use
You need
more than one at a time.
Yeah, you're going to need one plate per block at minimum. Yeah.
So yeah, it's
And then there's the
It's
question
so
of,
interesting.
he's saying like, well, they use wood. Well, that's a lot of wood too. And Egypt doesn't have a source of wood, so they have to ship that stuff in.
and I guess nobody else at the time was like there just wasn't a whole lot of writing going on anywhere else in the world at this time.
Yeah.
So
Sumer.
yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
And they,
Yeah.
they weren't. I mean, they started out in the early days. They're stamping clay,
Yeah.
and then they're like, "Hey, papyrus,
Yeah.
way better."
Yeah.
Now we don't know what they were doing when
Right.
they switched to the papyrus because we don't. That's all disintegrated.
Yeah.
So there's just there's this. It just goes dark
Yeah.
when they
the
switch. to,
Sumerians over there like, you see our giant triangles? We use these little bricks. What are you guys doing? Of course, they're gone now, right? For the most part, those piles of bricks they're no longer triangle, they're not.
yeah.
So Egyptians win in the long run, but still, it's just, yeah.
If they
I
would
don't
have
know.
cased them in granite, they might be there.
Yep. I was also thinking we need to end this, but I was also thinking, when you're talking about they're discussing the top platform, the quote unquote platform at the very top of the Great
Yeah.
Pyramid. It's easy for me to imagine that the reason, because I was thinking like, wait a minute. So if you're quarrying the casing stones off there because you want the casing stones because they're high quality. Well, who took several courses of core masonry off the top after getting all the casing stones off there? And I just think that it just occurred to me, probably other people have thought of this, is that what was above that platform, it was all casing stone. That you would make the entire tip of the pyramid out of those really
Yeah.
fine, because that's,
That's you don't want that thing to wear through.
right.
Yep.
So they removed, they removed the casing stones and they're like, oh, look,
Number
here's
of
more
courses.
blocks.
How many courses was it?
Oh, I can't remember. 9. It's missing some. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's. I can't remember exactly. There's 9 blocks of core masonry up there. It's supposed to be 12, but it's clear that there's several layers of there's several layers missing completely.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh, well, they were probably all of the casing stone material. You would just put a cap on the whole thing of that stuff right up there at the top. So they just took them all when they were mining it, when they were quarrying it. I don't know.
There's so much cool stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. And I still love the mystery of, the various tunnels and chambers and how this wouldn't fit through that. And
Yeah, I mean,
what happened? How did these people know about this part? And like, why is there no graffiti in there? And, you know,
Yeah.
it makes more sense to me that there would be lots of graffiti in the places where people knew about for thousands of years than that there's just none. Because there isn't any. It's weird.
Yeah.
Like, not one guy who ever went down to the pyramid actually took the time, like they did everywhere else, to carve their name into it instead of just
Or carve something.
Instead of just rubbing soot on the wall.
I don't know.
It seems strange. So
It does.
I mean, on the one hand, you say, well, it was a sacred space, or maybe they were afraid it was haunted or whatever. But does that cross cultures for thousands of years? Like, not one person? You know?
No.
I don't know. It's just weird.
And going back to the opening before the casing stones were removed, I read that article when we were doing the Giza power plant book. I read this article that somebody had written about, you know, Mamun's tunnel and all this stuff. It was a great article. Their point was that opening, that door, would have been known about in ancient times, and people would have gone up there, and there probably would have been so many people that had gone up there, and maybe they laid ladders up against the side, or however they scrambled up there, that there would have been clear signs.
Yeah, it would have left.
That's where people went, and then the door having been opened and closed so many times may have been chipped, and so it would be easy to see, and so that entrance would have been well known to the ancient world.
Right. So the idea that Mamun didn't know where it was is ridiculous. Yes, I agree. It's the same
now
with
that when the casing stones were quarried off of it, it looked different than it did today, right? Because there was just piles of chips and materials up against the sides. But the idea that he couldn't find it, but then tunneled in, like almost exactly to hit the juncture between, you know, the ascending passage and the descending passage.
It's just like you can see it at the Menkaure pyramid. You know, there's this huge gash.
Yeah, dug into the side.
When the entrance is completely obvious because it's been flattened around it.
Yeah.
You know, so now you could say, well, that gash may have been dug, like you're saying, when all the casing stones were gone. So that means there's a huge pile of rubble down there. Now it's hiding that entrance. Mm-hmm. But it seems easier to dig out the entrance you know is there than to dig that giant gash that's in the pyramid. Yeah. I don't know. You know, when we talked to Ben about it and Yusuf, he explained it as like, they knew where the entrance was.
They were trying to destroy it.
They were trying to destroy it, but they were also just dig into the core masonry to find hidden chambers. Because there was lots of assumptions made that like these builders would build chambers into the pyramid that had no access from any of the entrances.
And I think the same thing.
Yeah.
If you really want to hide something, don't make a door.
Yeah. Why would you need to put a door in it? Or an access to it, unless you're expecting to need to get into there later. But if you're really going to hide something in the thing, that you can build a whole chamber and have zero access to it from anywhere outside of the pyramid once the structure is complete. Rather than like actually making passageways and then plugging them with different kinds of stone so that it's obvious.
That it's really obvious that there's a passage there.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
There's so many things about this. It's like I can follow his reasoning on all that, you know, but he's coming from the position of like, this is a tomb. Mm-hmm. And you can follow his reasoning and everything. But
my favorite part, though, was when he was mentioning Khufu being buried in there unless he was put in a more secret place. So I'm just like, okay. So Khufu's like, I'm going to build this massive
What
tomb.
do you mean more secret place? Like that is the least secret place in the world. That pyramid.
Thus implying that he needed a more secret place, right? So they get done with the pyramid and Khufu's looking at it and he's like, wow, that's a really obvious tomb. I mean, it looks awesome, but holy shit, it's pretty obvious where I'd be. So let's have everyone think I'm there and they can come and worship or light their candles and say, yeah, Khufu, you were awesome at this pyramid, but actually we're going to dig a hole in this valley over here and stick me in there. Right? Like it's a monument as opposed to a tomb.
Like the idea that these people are doing this for themselves when they actually don't even know what's going to happen when they die. Like once you die, you don't know if they ever put you in there.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's crazy.
I mean, the idea that it's built as a monument to Khufu as opposed to a tomb for Khufu makes a lot more sense.
More believable.
Yeah. The only problem is that it doesn't have any writing on the inside of it.
Yeah. Or on the outside.
Yeah. Other than scribbles.
The scribbles. That was great.
Humanity across the ages has unconscionable scribblers.
Propensity for scribbling.
Yeah, scribbling.
All right, folks.
Thank you guys so much. Hope you enjoyed this episode. You can get a hold of us, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Go to the website, brothersoftheserpent.com. And I just want to say thanks to, you got some...
See if we got people to thank.
Yeah, I want to say thanks to some people. Give us reviews on iTunes if you can. Go to Apple Podcasts. That always helps the show. Thanks to those of you who are doing that. And also, I think Spotify now has a way for you to give reviews or stars or something. So yeah, do that. And Facebook group, there is one. Check it out. Twitter, we have one. Check that out. We have a Discord, which is where most of the Snake Force interaction happens. So you can join that by finding it on the website under the Discord chat, Snake Pit. There will be a test.
No producers or executive producers for this show, but it is just after the holidays, and
yeah,
man,
everybody spent all their money on presents. Yep, I'm broke.
But there are some smaller anonymous donations, so we thank all of you who support the show.
Thanks to Jeff for running the Discord and all the admins in there. Thanks to History Shift, who makes all of our YouTube videos. And I see Pod Doodles is back on track to do some more pod doodling. He said he took a break for the holidays, but he's coming back. So check him out. And thanks to Soraya from Where Did the Road Go, Ben from Uncharted X, and all of you listeners out there. We love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.
Happy New Year!